and all across the UK. On today's show, the Prime Minister will speak to the nation shortly, in a short while, on the day it was announced that net immigration hit almost 1 million last year after a mystery. 170,000 were found, it seems, down the back of the sofa at Downing Street. We're bringing this live, latest here on GB News. And Nigel Farage's Reform UK today announced it has smashed the 100,000 membership barrier and then sensationally unveiled former Tory Minister Dame Andrea Jenkyns as their latest big-name defection. And she blasted, the Tories are a sinking ship. But it wasn't all rosy for Reform, because today their former deputy leader Ben Habib dramatically quit the party, claiming he'd been banned from speaking at events. I'll speak exclusively to Ben Habib on today's show, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So all eyes are on Downing Street. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, expected to address the nation in around about 10 minutes' time. And the topic, of course, the topic du jour will be these astonishing immigration figures. Once again, proof we've totally lost control of our borders, despite 14 years of the Conservatives promising to bring numbers down, despite the Brexit referendum, the central tenet of which is take back control. That never happened. Almost 1 million came in last year. They've adjusted the figures, miraculously found 178,000 that weren't accounted for. Who's doing the maths? Diane Abbott? Where do they get these numbers from? This is simply unacceptable. What are they going to do about it? They owe us a huge, huge explanation. We're going to get some of that, hopefully, at 3:15 this afternoon. And until then, we'll have full analysis of what's an astonishing day in Westminster and Reform past the 100,000 mark. Dame Andrea Jenkyns sensationally crossing the floor. Could others follow? And yet, on the same day, Ben Habib dramatically throwing the towel in. I'll speak exclusively to Mr Habib on the show to find out the reasoning behind him leaving the party on the same day. It should be a good news day for them. Get in touch all usual ways, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now here's your headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines. The Prime Minister is set to deliver a news conference at Downing Street in the next few minutes, following news net migration has fallen by 20%. Net migration to the UK hit a record 906,000 in 2023, 166,000 higher than first expected. The latest ONS figures show the number is standing at 728,000 in the year to June 2024. Meanwhile, the cost of the asylum system has soared to more than £5 billion, nearly 12 times the amount spent a decade ago. The new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has admitted her party got it wrong on migration, while Labour's Migration Minister, Seema Malhotra, claims it was the Conservatives who lost control of the system.
What we've seen is that in the space of 4 years, net migration quadrupled to almost 1 million. We absolutely believe that net migration has to come down. But in order to do that, we need to go further. That's why we believe that you need to tackle the causes of net migration, including linking skills and visa policies. You're addressing those gaps in skills and reducing the reliance on overseas recruitment.
Now, a British soldier turned spy for Iran has been found guilty of breaching the Official Secrets and Terrorism Act. Daniel Khalif passed sensitive military information to Iranian agents and offered to stay undercover for over 25 years. Prosecutors say the 23-year-old collected a very large body of classified data, risking soldiers' lives while being paid in cash. Khalif escaped from Wandsworth prison in September, but was recaptured after 3 days on the run. He'll be sentenced next year. In other news, Reform UK says its membership has soared to over 100,000, up from just 15,000 last year. Party leader Nigel Farage slammed the Tories and Labour over what he called horrendous net migration figures, despite a 20% drop in the last year. And in a major coup for the party, former Conservative Minister Dame Andrea Jenkyns has joined and will stand as Reform's candidate for Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Kirsty Walk has accused Greg Wallace of making sexualised jokes during her time on Celebrity MasterChef in 2011. The former Newsnight host is one of 13 people to have reported inappropriate comments from Wallace over a 17-year period. Walk claims that he shared stories and jokes of a sexual nature in front of contestants and crew, which she felt were really in the wrong place. Other allegations include Wallace openly discussing his sex life and making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. The 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates the allegations. 2 police officers have been served with misconduct notices after a 17-year-old girl died fleeing a patrol car on the M5 motorway. Tamsin Hall, who was autistic, escaped the vehicle near Bridgewater on the 11th of November, crossing into oncoming traffic. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating how she managed to leave the vehicle while in custody. A full inquest, potentially with a jury, is scheduled for next November. One of Britain's largest unions has launched legal action against the government over means testing winter fuel payments. The move, which Unite claims has rushed and broke legal rules, will see 10 million pensioners miss out on the benefit. General Secretary Sharon Graham says it's a cruel cut and warned it will hit pensioners hard as the temperatures drop. Unite is pushing for an urgent High Court hearing to overturn the decision. The government says over 1 million pensioners will still receive the payment and urged others to check if they qualify for pension credit. Sir Keir Starmer has spoken with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as Russia intensifies its attacks on Ukraine's power grid. Zelensky described the assault as another act of Russian air terror, with over 90 missiles and nearly 100 drones targeting civilian infrastructure. The strike, which left 1 million homes without power, is the second in less than 2 weeks, raising concerns over a winter of crippling energy shortages. In the call, Zelensky also expressed thanks for the UK's continued support, including £3 billion in aid, and discussed strengthening defence cooperation. And Sir Ed Davies swapping Parliament for pop charts, hoping for Christmas #1 with Love Is Enough, a charity single featuring Bath's Philharmonia's Young Carers Choir. The song, recorded with a full orchestra and 20 singers, was inspired by the Lib Dem leader's own experience as a teenage carer. Davies says the single highlights the love and resilience of carers and hopes it will strike a chord with families this festive season. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. What a day of politics we have ahead of us. Immigration nation plus the rise of reform. And very shortly, we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, following the publication of UK immigration statistics. And ahead of this, I can now speak in our studio with GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. And I'm also joined by the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates. Welcome to the studio, both of you. An incredible day. I mean, yesterday, Kemi Badenoch and Chris Philp gave a rather hurried press conference. What's going on here, we thought. Now, Catherine Forster, I think all becomes clear. Or rather, all becomes clear as mud. Because the figures are down 20%, or so we're told, except they found an extra 178,000 down the back of the sofa for last year, which means it's down from a figure that's much higher than the one we were told last year. What on earth is going on? Can we trust any of these numbers? It's almost basically 1 million immigration last year, and it just says to me they've totally lost control, they've totally lost the plot.
It is incredible, isn't it? Because I was talking this morning, we knew it was going to come down. We expected it would come down to about 500,000, and here we are at 728,000 in the year to the end of June, when the Conservatives were in charge, and the year prior, 906,000, so close on £1 million. Bear in mind that the Brexit referendum was in part a vote to take back control, to control migration, and the government, the Conservative government that has just been booted out, presided not only of not getting migration down to the tens of thousands that they promised for years and years and years, but in an absolute ballooning of legal migration. It was about 250,000 when Boris Johnson came in. He said he'd get it down. They introduced this points-based system. Sure, the number of people coming from the EU, and only about 10%, 86% non-EU. These numbers are directly because of choices that the previous Conservative government made, having told us for years they were getting it down, and we find that it was close on a million people.
Rob Bates, let's bring you in now. I know you've been up since the crack of dawn crunching through these numbers, and I know you and I have been exchanging messages. You can't believe it. I can't believe it. What's leapt out at you?
Well, I think, first of all, the expectation management from both the parties was very poor. As we said, we were being briefed beforehand that it would probably be about 500,000 net. We now find out that it's 700,000 net, 900,000 net. I think the point that Catherine raised about the shift of the makeup of those that are coming into the country is one of the most important things that we need to pick up on here. There's a very important study produced in 2018 that found that those coming from Europe, generally the migrants that are coming from Europe, are actually net economic contributors in some instances, whereas those coming from outside the European Economic Area are actually more likely to impose a fiscal cost on the Treasury, and that's probably primarily because they bring 2 or 3 dependents with them, they work in those lower wage jobs. And yeah, we seem to have had this crisis escalating now to the point where we're seeing close to 1 million net. And one of the biggest policy decisions that was taken in this country's most recent history is the decision to introduce the health and social care visa, which greatly reduced the salary threshold for those coming into the UK, allowed incredibly unskilled people to come into roles that we do have the wherewithal within our own domestic workforce to fill. But unfortunately, we had Boris Johnson and Priti Patel with a mandate to deliver Brexit and to take back control, ultimately falling succor to lobby groups and interest groups and giving way and introducing this visa.
OK, I think we've got a couple of graphics now from the immigration report from the government website we can show you on screen, which just sets out some of the data. We can get them up now. There's one on the visa types. I think we've got... So this is the overall numbers. It's quite hard to see there, but the big numbers at the top, those are the numbers coming in. It sets out the work visas at 453,000, the student visas 444,000, the family visas 78,000, the safe and legal routes, this is things like Ukraine, 73,000. All of these numbers are, some of them are down, but a great many of them are not. And the point is, also, asylum is in there. Asylum has gone up. Asylum has doubled since the year ending 2021. And this, Catherine and Rob, could be back down to clearing the backlog. So we're going to clear the backlog. And what that means is you grant more asylum.
Well, yes, indeed. And meanwhile, we've got a new government that says that they're going to smash the gangs. Sir Keir Starmer appears to think that they don't need a deterrent in the form of Rwanda or something else, that smashing the gangs will be sufficient. I'm sure the government have only been in for a few months, but the numbers crossing illegally on small boats is 34,000 this year. That's against 29,000 in the whole of last year. And they've been quite lucky just in the last few weeks. There's been some bad weather. But, you know, clearly this is not happening, this smashing of the gangs, anytime soon. Now, the government will say they're returning more people, they are processing claims more quickly, but all of this still is horrifically expensive.
And Rob Bates, just to put it in context, I like to get my head around these numbers because they're so big. You need some context. That 906,000, that's the new figure with the additional 178,000 for 2022-2023. That's the equivalent of 3 Newcastles. 3 Newcastles in 1 year.
Well, you're absolutely right.
And this past year, beg your pardon, just to finish the point, there's 728,000. That's a Manchester plus a Mansfield. We think of it like that. This is like entire cities in multiples dumped on Britain every year and seemingly no end in sight.
It's very difficult to get your head around. I think if you look at the actual gross figure for the last 12 months, it's actually about the population of Birmingham that have come in as well. And obviously the net figure is the burden that's imposed on our infrastructure, on things like the NHS and housing. But the gross figure also represents a fundamental change in society. You had that graph up there, and I think an important figure that we need to realise as well is that only about 14% of visas were granted to those, 14 to 17% were granted to those that are actually coming to work. Obviously, there was 400,000 work work visas, but a large number of them were for dependents. That's now obviously been rowed back on by the Conservative government, the previous Conservative government. But the fact that only 14% are coming to work, and of that percentage, only about 40% will actually be earning enough to be paying more in tax than they're taking out of the system as well. You realise what the economic catastrophe that is awaiting us.
OK, Rob Bates, we are shortly crossing to Downing Street. The Prime Minister expected to address this precise notion. Catherine, what do you expect to come out of that? Because yesterday, the Tories tried to get in early, saying, yeah, we made mistakes, but it'd be worse under Labour. You're expecting Keir Starmer to say this happened under the Tories. Once again, it's that 14 years of Tory failure line.
I expect so, but let's not forget that the population of the United Kingdom in 1997 was 58 million. Now it's about 68. We've had 10 million. This started under Tony Blair when the EU expanded eastwards. He could have had controls that lots of other European countries put in place to limit the rate at which Eastern Europeans came into the country. He didn't feel that was necessary. It accelerated massively under the Tories, but nobody has sort of got such a shining example on this.
Right.
And I just think, given we were here yesterday talking about the benefits bill being out of control, talking about the millions of Brits that are out of work on sickness benefits or for whatever other reason. You know, 20% of big cities that are on out of work benefits. Something's gone very, very wrong when lots of our own people are out of work for whatever reason, and meanwhile there's hundreds of thousands coming into the country. And, you know, you can't build houses quickly enough. The government says they're going to build, 1.5 million new homes. But with the sort of rate of numbers here, they can't begin to keep up with this.
And in fact, Robert Bates, yesterday, Chris Philp, I can't believe he read out a list of bullet points which were a catalogue of failures under his own regime. It's almost like he'd been handed a piece of paper by Keir Starmer. It was astonishing. One of the points he raised was precisely that. We need to build 120,000 new homes every year just to cope with immigration. Well, we're not doing that. 64%, he said, think immigration is too high. Oh, you don't tell us. You don't know. What a surprise there. 8 cities the size of Liverpool, he said, have come in. Over 1 million people that cannot speak English at all. 68% of the entire of the immigrant population earn less than the median wage. That was your point, meaning they're a net burden to the taxpayer, not paying in. And all the time he was saying, but we cannot trust Labour on immigration. We're about to hear from the Prime Minister. What do you think he's going to say? What can he say?
Well, I think he will be primarily trying to put this onto the Conservative Party's plate, and, you know, it is the Conservative Party's issue. And I think the press conference yesterday was a very desperate attempt to try and grapple with their track record on this, which I don't think people are going to forget very easily. Keir Starmer hasn't really set out a plan since he's been in office on how he plans to deal with this issue. And I think, you know, you look at some of those people that have been put in positions that would be dealing with this, such as Angela Eagle, you have to kind of think, what is the strategy there for them to bring down numbers? They don't really seem to be the kind of people that have a track record talking about this issue, setting up plans to get those 9 million economically inactive back into work and to bring down our reliance on low-skilled, low-wage immigration, which is ultimately doing our economy a lot of disservice in the long run because it's stymieing automation, it's stymieing that investment that we need to really grow our economy.
OK, Rob and Catherine, one point we are expecting, I think around about 5 o'clock today, we are expected to hear plans of a UK and Iraq have agreed an unprecedented joint plan to tackle people smuggling gangs responsible for thousands of migrant crossings the Channel in small boats. Because on a 3-day visit to the country, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper also signed a new agreement to ensure failed Iraqi asylum seekers are returned home more swiftly. Do we think that those kind of deals are going to have any teeth? We saw a successful deal negotiated by Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party with Albania. All of those Albanians that came over, suddenly it was said, well, Albania is a safe country, off you go, son. Have they got the gumption to do that with Iraq?
I think all of these deals are certainly worth having. Every little bit helps, to almost quote a supermarket, forgive me. But it's very difficult to see without an actual deterrent. There are millions of people who would love to come and live here. It is a huge problem across Europe, of course. It is an international problem. But the point of Rwanda that the government scrapped was, the whole point was not to send lots of people to Rwanda, but basically to put people off coming in the first place. And lots of European countries are looking at third country processing. Italy has tried to get it sorted. It's got bogged down in some legal disputes, but it's an enormous problem, and the government's new border security commander has also said that without a deterrent, this is going to be extremely difficult to crack.
But Rob Bates, while we're still waiting for the Prime Minister to appear at Downing Street, let's talk about the ratio of numbers. The huge amount are coming through the front door. The huge amount is legal migration, not illegal migration. And that, as Catherine Forster correctly said, that is a government choice. In fact, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is emerging now. Let's go and listen to what he's got to say there at Downing Street.
When we came into office, we immediately conducted an audit of the public finances. And we found a £22 billion black hole. Now, the Independent Office of National Statistics has conducted vital work on the state of immigration and found the previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019. Time and again, the Conservative Party promised they would get the numbers down. Time and again, they failed. And now the chorus of excuses has begun. We heard that from the Leader of the Opposition yesterday. But what we didn't hear, what the British people are owed, is an explanation. Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck, it isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain. Remember that slogan? That is what they meant. A policy with no support and which they then pretended wasn't happening. And now they want to wave it away with a simple, we got it wrong. Well, that's unforgivable. And mark my words, this government will turn the page. That begins in the economy, because you cannot separate this failure from their refusal to do the hard yards on skills, on welfare reform, on giving our young people opportunities, rather than the easy answers of looking overseas. Because clearly the vast majority of people who entered this country did so to plug gaps in our workforce, skill shortages across the country, which have left our economy hopelessly reliant on immigration. 2.8 million people out of work on long-term sickness, a problem ignored, left to fester. 1 in 8 young people not in employment or education or training. Sectors of our economy, like engineering, where apprenticeships have almost halved in the last decade, while visas have doubled. So we're taking a different approach. We will publish a white paper imminently which sets out a plan to reduce immigration. The Migration Advisory Committee is already conducting a review. And where we find clear evidence of sectors that are over-reliant on immigration, we will reform the points-based system and make sure that applications for the relevant visa routes, whether it's the skilled worker route or the shortage occupation list, will now come with new expectations on training people here in our country. We will also crack down on any abuse of the visa routes. For far too long, we've been casual about malpractice in our labour market, which sends a clear signal overseas that we're a soft touch. Well, no more. Our rules will be enforced. Any employers who refuse to play ball, they'll be banned from hiring overseas labour. And I'm pleased to announce today a new security agreement between Iraq and the UK. This is a world first that will help us smash the people smuggling gangs and secure our borders. The Home Secretary has been out in Iraq to seal this deal, and we've also announced funding for Iraqi law enforcement to tackle this problem upstream, way before it reaches our shores. We're also tackling the utter mess we inherited in the Home Office. Asylum returns up 53% in the last 12 months compared with the previous year. Total returns up 34% in the last year. And we will keep on going, because this is the work of change. And alongside the NHS and the economy, securing our borders is the issue that matters to working people. You know, what people want from politics is not unreasonable. They want order and security, borders that we control, an NHS that protects you, an economy that offers secure work and good opportunities, not just for a few at the top, but for everyone. Let me say directly to the people watching, where the last government failed you, this one will not. They drove immigration numbers up. We will get them down. They left the NHS flat on its face. We will get it standing tall again. They made you poorer. We will put more money in your pockets. It won't be quick or easy, but we are going to turn things around, not with gimmicks, but with graft. A government that will not rest until the foundations are fixed, borders are secure, and Britain is rebuilt. Thank you. I'll now take questions. I think Chris Mason is first from the BBC. Chris.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason at BBC News. The UK appears to have become addicted to immigration, despite the fact that millions of people for years and years have indicated that they wanted to see the numbers fall. Why should people believe you now that you can achieve something that predecessors have not? And one other question, if I may, apologies. Following the BBC's investigation into Mohammed Al-Fayed, should there be a review or an inquiry into the work of the Metropolitan Police, the Crown Prosecution Service that you led, into the failings that have left millions of people without the answers and the justice they might have wanted? Thank you.
Chris, on your first point, what is clear from these figures is really stark, and I think should shock all of us, because the net migration figures in 2019 were 184,000. And then on the figures we've now got today, 4 years later, literally 4 years later, 906,000. 4 times as many. This isn't immigration that's gone up by a few thousand. This is a policy under the last government that's driven immigration up to record levels, a complete loss of control. And that is why we've set out the measures I listed in the words I just said in relation to the action that we are taking. But there's a fundamental problem here, and that's to do with the way our economy works and the loss of control of immigration under the last government. We are going to turn that around with the measures that I have set out. On the question of Al-Fayed, look, I think we need to firstly give confidence to anybody who wants to come forward that they should come forward, and then assess the situation when we see what the final picture is. Thank you, Chris. Beth.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Prime Minister, in the year to June 2023, net migration was the same amount as it was in the 3 years of freedom of movement up to the Brexit referendum vote. People feel incredibly let down by their politicians. You say you want to bring it down. What does that mean? Will you bring it down to levels of the low 100,000s that we saw in 2019 or 2013, 14, 15? Or can you also not do that because of your need for economic growth? Thank you.
Well, Beth, when you say people have been let down, you're absolutely right, because they were promised by the last government that it would get control of our borders, and we had a government that completely lost control of our borders. And this sort of increase is unprecedented. It's off the scale, what has happened in 4 short years. The way to get it down is the hard graft, not the gimmicks, but the hard graft of driving it down on the skills agenda, Migration Advisory Committee, making sure we're cracking down on employers that are breaking the rules, taking all the measures I've set out, measures that will have an impact on our immigration, which I do want to come down significantly. It needs to reduce. But these numbers, this 4-time increase, that wasn't just bad luck post-Brexit. That was their policy, and they drove immigration up. And as I say, we discovered a £22 billion black hole. We discovered that the prisons were in far worse shape, much fuller than we thought before the election. And now today, what we found is another incredible legacy failure, which is record numbers of immigration. It's our job now to turn it around, and we will. Thank you. And Amy from ITV.
Thanks. Amy Lewis from ITV News. Prime Minister, you obviously today to talk about immigration. Are you going to set a cap on net migration? And if not, how will the public know if you've been successful in delivering your promises? And just a follow-up question, if you don't mind, on what's potentially a landmark day tomorrow with assisted dying. Has your view on this changed since you voted on it in 2015?
Yeah, look, I want to see immigration come down significantly. And I said that before the election, I said that during the election, I say it again here today. So that means bearing down on the influences that have driven it up this high with the measures that I set out a moment ago. We had a supposed cap in place for the best part of a decade, and it didn't have any meaningful impact on reducing immigration. So I don't think setting an arbitrary cap, which is what previous governments have done, is the way forward. But do I want it significantly to reduce? Yes, I do, and that's what our plan will achieve. In relation to assisted dying, look, the vote is coming up tomorrow, obviously. The government is neutral on this, and it is a genuinely free vote for all members of Parliament, and I don't want to put pressure on them. I've obviously got a huge amount of interest and experience in this, having looked at every single case for 5 years that was ever investigated, and I will therefore be casting my vote tomorrow. Thank you. Chris, GB.
Chris Hope, GB News. You say you want net migration to fall significantly, Prime Minister. The OBR, which forecasts these numbers, forecasts 315,000 net migrants arriving here but until 2028, 2029, nearly twice the number in 2019. What level are you happy with? Will you cut it back to 2019 levels? And when will that happen by?
Well, Chris, that we want and are intending to drive these numbers down. They're far too high. They signal a loss of control. And that's what these policies are designed to achieve, and that's why the White Paper will be published imminently, bringing them together as a plan. I'm not going to pluck an arbitrary number, because that has been tried many years in a row, and it has achieved absolutely nothing. And what I'm not going to do with the British public is adopt an approach which we know has not succeeded and pretend that it's going to succeed. I think the days of fiction and pretending there are easy answers are over. These are the days of hard graft. Thank you, Chris. Kate from Times.
Kate McCann from Times Radio. Figures released today show that the asylum system is costing £5.4 billion in the last year. How much of that money has been spent on asylum hotels, and can you guarantee the British public that that spend will be zero by the end of next year? Thank you.
We must bring the cost of asylum down, and we have a manifesto pledge to bring the number of hotels down, to end the use of hotels, which we are driving hard at. The way to do that is to increase the processing of claims. Among the reasons that so many people are in hotels is because for a long time the claims weren't being processed. So more people arriving, none of them getting processed, and an ever-increasing pool of people that then had to be accommodated some way or another. That was completely unsustainable. We've transferred 1,000 staff into the processing and returns work of the Home Office. So a significant redeployment of staff which is driving up the processing claims. And of course, when it comes to returns, we've returned 9,600 since the election, and we have got more flights off in terms of the numbers on flights than has ever been done before. So it's processing in the first place, it's making sure that we can do the returns on the other, and deploying 1,000 staff in to do that vital work. And that's why their numbers are so significant. Jack at The Sun. Jack.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Jack Elson from The Sun. You've spoken today largely of immigration as a matter of economics, but many voters are concerned about the cultural impact on their communities. Is this an argument which you are sympathetic to?
Look, I have looked at it mainly as a matter of economics, because if you look at the breakdown within the very high numbers we've got today, very many of them are work visas. But look, in terms of the question you put to me, I do in principle think it's right that we should ensure that we've got the skills and training for people in this country for the jobs that we need. And that is among the drivers of this, that we haven't got the skills regime in place that allows young people, but not just young people in this country, to have the skills that they need and the skills that employers want in order to take us where we need to on the economy. I think the two don't go together, because I think people in this country are entitled to have the opportunity of the skills here. I think businesses are entitled to know that there's a skills strategy that will actually satisfy their needs and their demands. Matt from The Times.
Thank you. Matt Dathan from The Times. You've just announced there'll be new expectations on firms to train domestic workers. Other than the restrictions on visas, what incentives or sanctions will there be? And are you promising British jobs for British workers?
Well, I think it's... For too long, we've had this over-reliance on the easy answer of recruiting from abroad, and that's got to change. And it's a two-way street. We want to support employers, of course we do. We want to grow the economy, and I don't want to make it more difficult for businesses. But at the same time, and as I've said to them previously, they have to be involved in ensuring we've got the skills we need in this country in the places that we need them. That will come partly by devolving skills, getting more employers and local representatives involved in the skills strategies that we need. And so, you know, it is right that we have the skills available to people who live here, the opportunities that they want to develop their working lives, and give the employers the skills that they need near them for the jobs that they need doing. Thank you. Rajiv from The Guardian.
Rajiv Sar from The Guardian. I'm over here, Prime Minister. Nigel Farage said that Donald Trump hates the Chagos deal. Is he right?
Well, look, the Chagos deal is a good deal. It secures the base. That's in the vital interests of the US and the UK. And we are already engaging with the new administration in Mauritius as to how we take that forward. Thank you. Harriet from the Daily Mail.
Harriet Line, Daily Mail. The ONS has admitted that it's been too generous in its assumptions on its figures. Do you think that we need a total rethink of the way these figures are calculated? And do you think it's making it harder for government departments and agencies to plan when the ONS figures are so wide of the mark?
Well, I think it's really important that we resist the temptation to see the problem in these figures as lying with the ONS, because these are the revised figures. They're there for all to see. And what's shocking about them is not that they've been revised. What's shocking about them is the sheer figures. You have to double take when you see an increase of 184,000 to 906,000 in 4 years. If we think about the previous decade or more, in terms of the sorts of numbers we were talking about, what's shocking is not the way the figures are arrived at. This is one of those occasions, a bit like the 22 billion, a bit like the prisons are overfull, where the shock through the system is the sheer size of the number and the loss of control under the last government. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, that was the Prime Minister there speaking at Downing Street. His first reaction to the astonishing immigration figures out this morning began with a withering attack, it must be said, on the Conservatives. He said a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. It's a plan to liberalise immigration, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment, into open borders since Brexit. I'm still joined by Robert Bates and Catherine Forster. Catherine, I'll come to you first. That sounded very much like Nigel Farage. He was blasting the Conservatives on their record of failure. He said 4 times the amount of immigration this year when compared to 2019. Significant, of course, because that was the first post-Brexit so-called take back control year. What leapt out of Sir Keir Starmer's speech to you?
Well, yes, it could have been, a lot of that could have been Nigel Farage talking. What leapt out at me is that the government, the Labour Party, has finally cottoned on to just how massive an issue immigration is for the British people, because when they were campaigning, when Sir Keir Starmer set out his 5 missions in opposition, there was no mention of immigration, none whatsoever. I noticed at the party conference they'd added another mission to do with Border Security Command, and now he's just said that their top 3 focuses are the NHS, the cost of living and securing our borders. They have realised, and of course, Reform are doing very, very well in the polls. Labour are plunging. The local elections are next May. They have realised how big an issue this is, a very accurate diagnosis of the problem. But of course, what are they going to do to fix it? Because we hear these sorts of comments and then things don't change, or indeed they get worse, as they have done recently.
Rob Bates, what also struck me is it seemed like the media had drinking some kind of beverage that had made them woke up. The BBC said the UK has become addicted to foreign labour. Wow, never thought they'd say that. And Sky News are saying, what are you going to do to bring it down? When you say you're going to bring it down, the most effective question was, of course, our colleague Chris Hope. He said, what level will you be happy with? And here's where I think we start to go, And he said, we will not pluck an arbitrary figure out of the air and pretend it's going to work. So is it a case today, high on the rhetoric, but quite slim on any form of detail, or indeed, certainly, any form of target?
Yeah, so in that room there seemed to be a bit of a consensus that maybe things had got a bit out of hand. I think the real problem was, as we said, the discussion around 2019 levels or low hundreds of thousands somehow being an acceptable level at which to have net migration. I think you'd be very hard-pressed to go back to the British public and say to them, look, we've managed to reduce net migration down from staggeringly high, unprecedentedly high levels down to where things were in 2019, when people still had enough. But even back then, as early as 2013, people were voicing very clear concerns about net migration, which was only at that time about 250,000. We need to really have a conversation about how far back we are going to go. And of course, Starmer was very keen to ladle everything on the Conservatives and the Conservatives' distribution of work visas and student visas. There is still things that Keir Starmer can do to mitigate some of that damage, because in 5 years' time, those who have been given a work visa become eligible for settlement, and we need to have a conversation about whether the Home Office should be just rubber stamping those applications, because at the moment about 95% of people that want indefinite leave to remain are able to stay. That's something that Keir Starmer should be looking to if he's serious.
And Catherine Forster, there a reference to we've become dependent on foreign workers for too long, again sounding very much like Mr Farage, and saying we need to be focusing on British workers, British jobs, sound a bit like Gordon Brown, but then saying any employers who refuse to play ball will be banned from hiring overseas workers. But I want to return to a point that we were discussing during that speech. How are the numbers so vastly different? Where do these additional numbers came from? And he was specifically asked there. The ONS figures are so wide of the mark. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer himself started saying, when the numbers are this wrong, it's not just a mistake. He's intimating that the Conservatives, are massaging the numbers. Is that the case? How are the numbers so wrong? Who's getting them wrong? And do we need a full inquiry into what's going on here?
Well, honestly, we don't know. But the thing is that we are only finding out the true scale of what's actually happened long after it's happened, which is obviously deeply, deeply unhelpful. And so Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson presided over this while all the time telling us they were going to get net migration down. But the British jobs for British workers, which was essentially the message. The trouble is we've been hearing this for so long. We've been hearing about the UK's addiction to cheap foreign labour for years and years. Boris Johnson liked to talk about high-skilled, high-wage economies, but it's been so easy for companies to just bring in workers, not spending the money to train our own people, for government not to take the difficult decisions, the money that's needed to get people off benefits and into work. The whole system is, you know, has failed. Not just the people on benefits, but the economy hasn't grown. You know, that was supposed to be a big benefit of migration, is that we will all be better off. And yet, in fact, since the financial crisis, the economy has really barely grown, and very few of us are feeling better off.
Okay, Catherine Forster and Robert Bates, we have to leave it there, but stick with us. We've got plenty more coming after the next break. And just to repeat, a withering attack there from Sir Keir Starmer on immigration, saying a failure on this scale isn't bad luck. It's a plan to liberalise immigration, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment, into open borders since Brexit. An astonishing attack. Full analysis throughout the rest of the show with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values, or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadland.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:49 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the animal rights group PETA has been accused of undermining real issues after asking a boozer to change its name, claiming the name is offensive to foxes. The animal rights welfare group wrote to the owners of the Sly Old Fox on Hurst Street in Birmingham, saying the name was derogatory. It isn't. Instead, they asked them to consider swapping sly with clever. Foxes aren't clever, they are sly. In fact, they've been called far worse. And joining me now from outside that boozer is the GBNews reporter, Will Hollis. Will, I cannot understand what their problem is. Foxes, every day at my house, they leave a calling card on my kids' bikes. They try and kill my cat. They rip my bin bags open. They're an absolute nightmare. They get called a lot worse than sly around my way. What on earth is the problem that they've got at Peter?
Yes, well, this isn't uncommon for Peter to approach pubs in this way. The name of the Sly Old Fox is just the latest victim. The Old Bulldog in Stoke-on-Trent, they've been approached suggesting that the Old Bulldog should be changed to the Old Mutt because bulldogs sometimes have breathing problems, so that could be bad for encouraging more people to get bulldogs. The Fighting Cocks, that was asked to rebrand as the Happy Hens because nobody would approve of cockfighting, but that was one approach that they made. This is something that Peter has done over a number of years, and the old fox is the old sly old fox, forgive me, is just the latest victim. They say that sly carries connotations like foxes are cunning or deceitful, which is unfair and inaccurate, and labels them as pests. This is a direct quote from Peter's Vice President of Programmes, Elisa Allen. She says, "The words we use matter, and perpetuating negative stereotypes about foxes makes it easier to justify hunting or poisoning these unique and intelligent beings." I've been asking people out on the street in Birmingham what they think about the request to change.
I think, to be honest, if you were a fox and you were called a sly old fox, you'd probably think you were doing quite well.
Well, I have foxes in my garden occasionally, and I do think they're very clever. So I think clever is a good move, actually.
Well, I think foxes are very clever and not sly at all.
I don't think it's an insult to foxes. I'm fond of foxes, but I don't think that name does them any damage.
I think it's marvellous, and to be fair, I live by a field and I love foxes.
Keep it the sly fox. He's a clever thief.
I think it's a bit silly. You know, I think the world's gone mad, changing everything. I suppose it's what they call woke, isn't it, these days?
Of course, fox hunting is banned. It's something that's been illegal for around 2 decades, but Peter seems to think that by having a name, the Sly Old Fox, it can encourage these negative stereotypes about foxes. They say that the clever old fox would show respect to one of Britain's most iconic native animals. Today, and for the last few days, the Sly Old Fox has not made a public statement to the media, but earlier when I went inside and I spoke to a couple of the staff members, they told me that a manager will be in later.
Will Hollis, what are they drinking at Peter or Petter or whatever it is? I mean, are they on the hooch? Why are they getting so bothered about something? It's the name of a pub. No one's got a problem. You know, to be called sly is quite nice. I've been called far worse than sly. Foxes are sly. They're just going around looking for trouble all the time. Will Hollis, what you should do is get yourself in that pub and have a drink and try and calm down, because this is insane.
Well, they're quite popular with cask ales, I'm told. One of the gentlemen who... it's a theatre pub. It's directly opposite the big ballet here in Birmingham, and one gentleman said he went in, had a pint while his missus was at the ballet with his friends, her friends, and he said he had a fantastic time. Is it really? How you doing, my friend? It's a lively night here in Birmingham on a Thursday. We're just here doing the news, my friend.
Oh, news?
But, can it be in it? No, it's all done now, I think. Thank you very much. You have a fantastic... There's a lively crowd here in Birmingham, and I'm sure that gentleman will be very interested in this story about whether the old Sly Fox will change its name to the Clever Fox.
Well done there, Will Hollis. I can see your buttocks clenching as you got heckled live in the streets there outside the old Sly Old Fox. Well done, my old son. We kept it nice and before the watershed. Thank you very much. Now then, don't go anywhere because we'll be analysing that amazing speech from Keir Starmer, calling immigration a failure on this scale is a plan to liberalise immigration, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment, into open borders. An astonishing, withering attack on the Conservatives. Full analysis after the break, including I'll be joined by Ben Habib from the Reform Party.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Getting a little milder over the next few days. Certainly tonight, not as frosty as last night. Still a few fog patches around. Didn't clear in some places under this area of high pressure. So it's across the eastern parts of England in particular. That's where we've got the lightest winds. That's where we're seeing that fog thickening up. Some not very pleasant conditions out on the roads here. But elsewhere, the cloud is increasing, the breeze is picking up, and it will be a wet night for parts of the north and west of Scotland, particularly over Skye. Very soggy indeed here, and that rain spreading across the Northern Isles too. Much of the mainland, though, dry and with a lot of cloud in the west, more breeze. A much milder night here. Still quite cold in eastern areas with light winds, but that fog should tend to clear away as we go through the early hours. And actually across much of eastern England, fine day to come on Friday. Going to be a bit of a wet start, though, across Orkney and Shetland. That rain should pull away to the north. Much of the mainland of Scotland starting dry, nowhere near as frosty as this morning, and we're well above freezing in Northern Ireland. Double digits to start the day on Friday here, and we'll have that contrast from east to west, whereas it'll still be cold in the east, much milder further west across England and Wales. As we go through the day, we'll see that cloud continuing to thicken in the west, so quite a grey day here with patches of rain coming into Northern Ireland, turning quite damp here by the afternoon, and more rain pushing back into the Western Isles of Scotland, so again very wet here. But even across western parts of the mainland, we'll see rain creeping in by the end of Friday. The west of Wales, southwest England, seeing a few showers. It's a lot milder here, but it will be quite gusty, especially on the west coast of Scotland. Much of eastern England staying fine with hazy sunshine throughout the day. We will see a bit more of that rain just creeping inland as we go through Friday evening, so a few showers cropping up over northern England and into the Midlands. And we'll see a bit of patchy rain this weekend, but a lot of dry weather, mostly cloudy and breezy, but it will be a lot milder.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues building for the M62 eastbound Birchwood to Eccles. Past junction 11 through to 12, there's a breakdown there and a lane closed. It's slow. Stop-start, a lane shut southbound M40 from Warwick at 15 there. It's all due to a collision queuing on both sides of the carriageway though. All the traffic on the northbound M1 being held 13 to 14. So around Milton Keynes, so queuing for a vehicle fire. Also northbound at 10, the Luton Airport Spur Road. Queues, lane 4 is combed off at the scene of a collision. Anti-clock M25, a broken down lorry blocking 2 lanes. Slow going, Lakeside at 30 towards Romford and Basildon at 29. Also anti-clock 27 towards 26 at Waltham Abbey. Lane 4 there is combed off. There's a broken down car and that's queuing as well.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. Of course, we're broadcasting live for you from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the Prime Minister lays the blame at the door of the Conservative Party as net immigration nears an incredible 1 million. We'll have all the expert analysis throughout the show on how things went so very, very wrong for taking back control. And Nigel Farage's Reform UK announced today that it has smashed through the 100,000 membership barrier, but then sensationally unveiled former Tory Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins as her latest big-name defection, and she blasted the Tories are a sinking ship. But it wasn't all rosy for Reform today, because earlier their former deputy leader Ben Habib dramatically quit the party, claiming he'd been banned from speaking at events. I'll speak exclusively to Ben shortly on today's show to find out the truth of what's going on at the heart of Reform. And is there any way back for the former deputy leader? That's all coming in your next hour. Well, to show, always a pleasure to have your company. Have the lunatics taken over the asylum? How can immigration figures go up to 1 million? They found an extra 178,000 down the back of the sofa at Downing Street. Or was it the ONS? We don't know. Where are these numbers coming from? How many people are in the country? Is it time for an emergency census? Have we got any grip on the true situation? Yesterday, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, said things will get worse under the Labour Party. Well, today, Sir Keir Starmer said this is a failure on this scale. It isn't just bad luck. It's a plan to liberalise immigration, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment on open borders since Brexit. So what they're fighting like rats in a sack about who's responsible. But the fact of the matter is nobody has grasped the nettle since the Tony Blair era. What can be done about this? That's today's big topic. Get in touch with your views the usual way, gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your headlines. It's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. The Prime Minister has accused the previous government of running an open borders experiment while giving a press conference at Downing Street a short while ago. In the latest migration data released today, net migration fell 20% in the year to June 2024, down from a record high of 906,000 in the previous year. Meanwhile, the cost of the asylum system has soared to more than £5 billion, nearly 12 times the amount spent a decade ago. Sir Keir Starmer's speech comes as the government has announced an immigration deal with Iraq. Iraq is one of the top 10 countries people travelling in small boats come from. The Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said it is a landmark moment that will tackle small boat crossings at source and help the pledge to smash the gangs. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister used his speech to blame the Conservatives for high migration and said his government will turn the page but refused to commit to a migration cap.
Look, I want to see immigration come down significantly.
And I said that before the election, I said that during the election, I say it again here today. So that means bearing down on the influences that have driven it up this high with the measures that I set out a moment ago. We had a supposed cap in place for the best part of a decade, and it didn't have any meaningful impact on reducing immigration. So I don't think setting an arbitrary cap, which is what previous governments have done, is the way forward. But do I want it significantly to reduce? Yes, I do, and that's what our plan will achieve.
Now, the Scottish Government has announced all pensioners in Scotland will receive a winter fuel payment next year. From 2025, every pensioner in the country will receive the new benefit, with those in receipt of qualifying benefits like pension credit getting £200 or £300, depending on their age, and wealthier pensioners getting £100. It comes after both the UK and Scottish governments earlier this year axed the universal winter fuel payment, except for those in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits. In other news, former British soldier Daniel Khalif has been found guilty of spying for Iran. Prosecutors say he collected secret and sensitive information on UK special forces and contacted Iranian intelligence soon after joining the army. After 23 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Khalif of breaching the Official Secrets Act and the Terrorism Act, but he was cleared of a bomb hoax at his barracks. Khalif escaped Wandsworth Prison in 2023, hiding under a food lorry, but was later caught and admitted breaking out. He claimed he wanted to be a double agent, but his lawyer dismissed it as more Scooby-Doo than 007. 2 police officers have been served with misconduct notices after a 17-year-old girl died fleeing a patrol vehicle on the M5 motorway. Tamsin Hall, who was autistic, escaped the vehicle near Bridgewater on the 11th of November, crossing into oncoming traffic. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating how she managed to leave the vehicle while in custody, and a full inquest, potentially with a jury, is scheduled for next November. Reform UK says its membership has soared to over 100,000, up from just 15,000 last year. Party leader Nigel Farage slammed the Tories and Labour over what he called horrendous net migration figures, despite a 20% drop in the last year. And in a major coup for the party, former Conservative Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins has joined and will stand as Reform's candidate for Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Kirsty Walk has accused Greg Wallace of making sexualised jokes during her time on Celebrity MasterChef in 2011. The former Newsnight host is one of 13 people to have reported inappropriate comments from Wallace over a 17-year period. Walk claims that he shared stories and jokes of a sexual nature in front of contestants and crew, which she felt were really in the wrong place. Other allegations include Wallace openly discussing his sex life and making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. The 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates the allegations. And Sir Ed Davies swapping Parliament for pop charts, hoping for Christmas #1 with Love Is Enough, a charity single featuring Bath's Philharmonia Young Carers Choir. The song, recorded with a full orchestra and 20 singers, was inspired by the Lib Dem leader's own experience as a teenage carer. Davey says the single highlights the love and resilience of carers and hopes it will strike a chord with families this festive season. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, in this past hour, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, gave a withering press conference reacting to the immigration figures that were released earlier this morning. And Keir Starmer, on numerous occasions, laid the blame squarely at the door of the Conservative Party and vowed to secure Britain's borders.
Government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019.
And joining me now live from Downing Street is GB News' political editor Chris Hope, who was at that announcement and indeed asked an excellent question. Chris, let's start with some detail on the speech there. Yesterday, Kemi Badenoch squarely putting the boot into the Labour Party. Today, the Labour Party squarely booting them back. A withering analysis of the 14 years of Tory governance. A failure on this scale isn't just bad luck, it's a plan to liberalise immigration, sounding every inch like it's trying to imitate a certain Mr Nigel Farage. You were there. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, hi Martin. Well, welcome here from Downing Street, where moments ago we had that press conference with the Prime Minister. Yesterday we heard from Kemi Badenoch. She said her government got it wrong on migration. Well, not half, frankly. I mean, 14 years of cock-up on this policy is what's at the door of the Tory party. Now we're on to a Labour government. Now, we heard there, Sir Keir Starmer correctly can attack the Tories for this failure. It's all on their watch. 906,000 people arriving here in June 2023, an upgrade of 166,000 people. Extraordinary number there to get it wrong. You called there for an open census or an emergency census of who's actually living here. Well, how on earth the ONS got that figure so wrong is surprising. Now, Sir Keir Starmer wouldn't be drawn into that. He said simply, whatever the figure is, it's still, it's still nearly a million people, and that is on the Tory watch. Now, he called it there an open border experiment. It happened by design, not by default, which is quite a striking attack, I think, on the Tory party. One nation experiment in broken borders. This government, he says, will turn a page. These increases are unprecedented and off the scale. So we're going to be hearing very shortly from the government with a new white paper to tackle immigration. They look at the points-based system. They're going to try and force companies to hire British workers, not employ workers from overseas. We asked him, I particularly wanted to know for GB News viewers, what he thought an acceptable figure was. The Treasury said that around 315,000 people will be coming here, legally settling here, a net figure between now and near the end of the decade. What was his figure? Here was my question.
Migration to fall significantly, Prime Minister. The OBR, which forecast these numbers, forecast 315,000 net migrants arriving here, but until 2028, 2029, nearly twice the number in 2019. What level are you happy with? Will you cut it back to 2019 levels? And when will it happen by?
Chris, that we want and are intending to drive these numbers down. They're far too high. They signal a loss of control. And that's what these policies are designed to achieve, and that's why the white paper will be published imminently, bringing them together as a plan. I'm not going to pluck an arbitrary number because that has been tried many years in a row and it has achieved absolutely nothing. And what I'm not going to do with the British public is adopt an approach which we know has not succeeded and pretend that it's going to succeed. I think the days of fiction and pretending there are easy answers are over. These are the days of hard graft.
And there we have a loss of control there admitted by this government. Now, those who voted for Brexit back in 2016 was about taking back control of our borders and our laws. Now, the actual lack of control, it is all on the Tory watch. They seem to open the floodgates to fix labour shortages without any real thought for those living here. I mean, those numbers, even just where we are now with the official forecast at the budget last month, 315,000 arriving here annually. Over 5 years, that's 1.5 million new people. That's the number of new homes that this government wants to build, and no one thinks they're going to get there. So the house building targets for this country, the home building targets for this country, will barely mean treading water and dealing with those arriving here and settling here from overseas, let alone those waiting for homes in this country. It is a shocking failure, I would say, by the entire political class. Currently, it's all on the Tory party. We'll see where it goes with Labour, Martin, but right now the PM there telling me he will not be setting a cap. That means we can't judge his success. We do know, and he kept saying it, that the figure from 2019 was 4 times the figure in 2023. So it was 4 times less in 2019. Even a figure then is well over 100,000. All these ministers, the government, they've got to get to grip with this. We'll see it shortly from the Labour Party.
Chris Hope, so many questions to try and get our heads around here. For starters, simply finding 178,000 bonus immigrants down the back of the sofa. Who's doing the maths? Diane Abbott? Is this the ONS? Is this the government? Is this the Prime Minister? Where are these numbers coming from? Have we got any idea how many people are here? And then on the specific point, which is so superbly asked, OK, so what's your target? What we got in return was, well, how long's a piece of string? We're not prepared to go down that route. Chris, don't you feel that the public is starting to think that all of them talk a great fight, they promise to be better than the last lot who were so terrible, but nobody seems to have any solutions, any way of getting a grip?
It's hard to work out how these things happen. I think there was a degree of an admission from Kemi Badenoch. When we asked yesterday about why her government couldn't control migration, she said, well, I was the business secretary and I thought that by increasing the salary threshold would have controlled numbers. But of course, she wasn't aware what was happening in the NHS or in the health service, and she wasn't aware of what was happening in DEFRA for the farming sector, the environment sector. I think what's happened here is ministers are siloed. They try and work out what they need for their departments, their sectors, without anyone having the whole view. And I think what will happen from this Labour government, there will be a whole government view of migration, and that will be to be welcomed, because otherwise you have spikes in different parts of the community when measures to control salaries at the top end, to control those who come here, isn't really have any bearing on other sectors because of other needs to fill holes here. This number, we're yet to find out how it happened or why it happened, but certainly to have that restated number, I mean, who knows what the number will be restated for the year to June 2024. Will that one also go up? Still, we're on Tory time here, not on the Labour Party's time in government. They recognise the need to get to grips with this. I would say, having observed governments and ministers for 20 years, setting a target from the centre does whip the rest of Whitehall into action, and the fact he failed 2 or 3 times in that press conference to give us a target. David Cameron said below 100,000. Robert Jenrick, when he ran for office for the Tory leader, he said below 10,000. We haven't got a figure yet from either Kemi Badenoch or from Keir Starmer. That could be a mistake, I think, because once you set a target internally, that can direct all of government to hit that figure.
Superb stuff, Chris Hope. It really, really does feel like the lunatics have taken control of the asylum system. And talking of which, let's move on now to the human rights lawyer, David. Hey, David, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. But I don't quite know what to make of all this. It just feels like no one's really got a Scooby-Doo. We've got no idea who's here. We've got no idea what they're doing, no idea where they are, no real idea where they're coming from. And on top of it all, back into your field of expertise, the asylum figures, the numbers are 99,790 claimed asylum in the previous year. That's 77,066 cases. That is double the number since September 2021. And it seems to me that the solution to getting rid of people on asylum is to put more officers in place to make it easier to get into Britain. And David, hey, I say to you time and time again, does that not send the message out? It's rolling out a red carpet to the world.
Absolutely. I mean, good afternoon, Martin. It's utter chaos just watching how this story developed this morning. It's like Punch and Judy politics, but over something so very important. There's unfathomable negligence, I think, on behalf of the previous government and the Home Office under them. But even now, we don't know exactly what the figures are, who to believe. Has people been cooking the books, as I mentioned before? You know, I think we're getting to the time now that the only way forward, really, so we can exactly know what the problem is for a full public inquiry into the system that is in place. So we know if the numbers are real, if they're not, how much was spent and wasted. I think now is the time for a full public inquiry into what has happened, so we can actually know what we're dealing with. And I think, you know, the Prime Minister coming on and doing a press conference shows how severe this situation is now, and something really must be done. And you, quite frankly, you can't trust either of the parties at the moment, I think, on this, because it's become such a hot issue.
I think you're exactly right. I think that's the key word, trust. If we can't trust the figures, if we can't trust the people who are gathering the data to give us the truth, then the whole thing starts to spiral into oblivion. The whole thing is on quicksand. I mean, how can the figures be so inaccurate? And when Sir Keir Starmer was asked by a member of the press, well, is this the fault of the ONS? He got quite spiky. He was trying to blame it on the Conservative Party, what's basically accusing them of cooking the books, which is a huge accusation to make. What do you think the reality is? I mean, how can we get the numbers so wrong? What is this, a rounding error? People just suddenly materialise and turn, hey, hi, I'm over here. I came in illegally last year. I'd like to be counted. What's going on?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think a few months ago when we spoke, I accused the government of cooking the books because the way that figures were actually, the numbers were interpreted were changed. So it looked like things were getting better, but the reality was that they changed the way they calculated figures and how they counted things. This is a little bit different. This is they've actually lost people. So it's not just changing the way that the figures come up to, it's the actually losing people. And I don't think you're going to receive truth from either side. And that's why I think the only way forward really is a full public inquiry into this. And that's something I think that we should now start to push forward, because to see what the reality is, and I think that's the way forward. It's shocking that they can't count.
I think you've got a great point, and it would need to be fully independent, because if the Conservatives yesterday are blaming the Labour Party today are blaming the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister is saying it's not the ONS. We just don't know what's going on. I think the whole thing is steeped in chaos. Thank you very, very much for your expertise, as ever. Human rights lawyer, great friend of the show, and very dapper as ever, David Hay. Thank you very much. Now some good news north of the border, because the Scottish Government has announced that the winter fuel payments are to be reintroduced for all pensioners in Scotland next year. That's an astonishing piece of good news for the OAPs in Scotland. And the new Holyrood benefits will not be ready, though, until late 2025. The Social Justice Secretary, Shirley Ann Somerville, told Parliament earlier on. And GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire joins us now live from Edinburgh. Tony, this is excellent news for pensioners north of the border. Tell us more.
Yes, good afternoon, or good evening is it now, as the sun goes down so early these days it's always hard to tell, but that sundown brings the cold, and that is high on the agenda of people up in Scotland ever since the Labour government, preceded then by the SNP government, announced the scrapping of that winter fuel benefit. Well, today, good news across the country, as it was announced that all pensioners in Scotland will, in 25-26, receive money from the government to help with winter heating. To dig down into the details a little bit more, those who are in receipt of pension credits, well, they'll get around £200 or £300, depending on their age. And even those who don't make the criteria for pension credit, the government is also willing to give them £100. Now, Shirley Ann Somerville, she told the Parliament today that we will not abandon old people in this winter or any winter, and she said we'll do our best to make sure that nobody has to make that decision between heating and eating. Now, in addition to all this, she also announced another £41 million package, which includes around £20 million going to the Scottish Welfare Fund. That helps local councils issue money out in targeted areas where it's really needed, and then a further £20 million for the Warmer Home Scotland scheme. Now, that's Scotland's national fuel poverty scheme, and that helps people install energy efficient heating among their homes. Now, this is something of a slap in the face to Labour, although some were saying that actually it's Scottish Labour that have driven the Scottish Government to do this, with Anas Sarwar, leader of Scottish Labour, campaigning as recently as last week, talking about for the 2026 Scottish election that Scottish Labour was going to campaign to bring back the winter fuel payments. Now, certainly up and down the country, this will be a huge sigh of relief. You know, we're no stranger to protests in Scotland these days, but certainly this is one that people will be happy to hang up their placards.
I'll say, Tony Maguire, it is a political headache, though, for the Prime Minister. Big embarrassment for now, breathing a sigh of release, the pensioners north of the border. Tony Maguire there, live from Edinburgh. Superb. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, coming up, Greg Wallace steps away from the BBC show MasterChef because it's been reported that the former Newsnight host Kirsty Walk is now among 13 people who have accused the presenter of making inappropriate sexual comments. That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now we're joined now by Sophia Viraji, the co-founder of the Azealia Foundation, which was created due to the tragic passing of her 8-month-old daughter to leukemia. The foundation is doing some incredible work for children's cancer.
Yeah, some really incredible stuff. They've just launched a PhD even where they're funding young doctors to specialise in childhood cancer as, get this, I wasn't aware of this, it's one of the most underfunded areas in the NHS. So not many sectors choose to go down that route, unfortunately. The charity, the foundation, have donated over £1 million worth of equipment to hospitals as well, and we're delighted to welcome Sophia. You've turned a tragedy and grief into triumph, I guess, and something so inspiring. Just tell us about that. Do you recognise that in yourself and the work you're doing?
Yeah, I'm here to always honour my daughter and to always continue her name, her legacy, and to support all of these other children fighting against childhood cancer.
It was all over social media. I mean, you were, at one point, probably one of the most famous families in this country because of Azealia and Azalia's fight. When you look back now at that time, does it give you comfort that you had so many people behind you?
Absolutely. The community that we have got, the humanity that we've seen in the UK and all around the world, in fact, has really touched my heart, and that kindness, love and support has always been the backbone of carrying me through this, to give me hope, to give me belief, and it still inspires me and encourages me till today to continue to do that, to show that light, to show that courage and bravery.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 4:26. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. The former Newsnight host, Kirsty Walk, is among 13 people now accusing MasterChef presenter Greg Wallace of making inappropriate sexual comments. The 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates allegations of historical misconduct. And the show's production company says that the complaints were made this week and an external review is currently underway. And Greg Wallace, who's been with MasterChef, of course, since 2005, is apparently fully cooperating with the investigation, and he's previously denied claim from 2018, saying they were promptly investigated and found that he hadn't made any inappropriate comments. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former showbiz editor at the Daily Express, Lee Purvis. Lee, welcome to the show. So the MasterChef host finds himself in a bit of a pickle. Not the first time he's been in the headlines for the wrong reasons. Tell us more.
Absolutely. So Greg Wallace, known to so many of us all over the globe, actually, for his cheeky chap image and persona that he portrays predominantly through MasterChef and the spin-off MasterChef The Professionals, is no stranger when it comes to controversy. You know, he has talked openly in interviews about his controversial love life. He's been married 4 times, you know, one of which marriages ended just after a few weeks of marriage. He jokes openly about that fact, you know. He is very sensational in the words that he uses on some of the TV programmes that we see. You know, there have been so many complaints that have been sent onto Ofcom over the years as well, who of course regulate broadcast media in our country. So he's no stranger to this. He has previously denied allegations, and I do also have to say that his lawyers, on the back of today's news coming out about this week's allegations, also strenuously deny those accusations and actually say they're false, and that, you know, Greg is very much cooperating with ongoing investigations. And the thing is, you've got to remember about a case like this is it's extremely hard and quite complicated when you are doing an investigation of this stature. You know, you have to speak to third-party people, the production company themselves, witnesses, you know, go through CCTV footage, past employment records. It can be extremely complicated, and it'll be very interesting to see what does unfold on the back of this.
That's right. Of course, we have to say as innocent until proven guilty. That's the basis of all British law. Some of these allegations go back through to 10 years, a decade ago, simulating sex acts while somebody was cleaning his trousers. Allegations he's always been very touchy-feely, making another allegation, making disgusting sex-related jokes. But the fact that a presenter with the credibility, the magnitude, the heritage of Kirsty Walk coming forward, these allegations are serious and they mean business, and he's got a job on his hands here to clear his name.
Absolutely. And I think from the moment early today when we saw Kirsty Walk come forward, you know, it adds another layer of authority, doesn't it? Just as you say, you know, Greg at the moment, a huge name across the world and in America. And America's quite an interesting market for this in particular. So here we have Greg, you know, this career from greengrocer through to entrepreneur and TV broadcaster, podcaster, you know, writer, author. He's got an autobiography. He's also an MBE. You know, he has an MBE. We should also mention that at this stage as well. However, Kirsty coming forward does give another layer of authority here, and it's being taken incredibly seriously. We know that he's had to temporarily, or maybe more than temporarily, step down from MasterChef. And tonight, viewers will see, obviously, the spin-off of MasterChef, The Professionals, go out on air, because that was pre-recorded, and you'll see that go out to air between now and December, as that was planned. But again, ongoing investigations may see, you know, even more people come forward. We know how these things tend to work. One person comes forward and then it can incentivise somebody else to come forward. So again, let's see what happens over the next few days.
OK, thank you for that summary. Excellently put. Thank you very much. And that's the former showbiz editor at the Daily Express, Lee Purvis. Thank you very much to have your opinion on the show. Now, loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including it's been a mixed day for Reform UK as they signed Dame Andrea Jenkins as their 100,000th member, with Nigel Farage saying give them a week and they'll be overtaking the Tories. But it wasn't all rosy for Reform as their former deputy leader, Ben Habib, on the same day dramatically quit the party, claiming that he's been banned from speaking at events. And I'll speak exclusively to Ben Habib in just a moment. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's 4:31. These are your headlines. The Prime Minister has accused the previous government of running an open borders experiment while giving a press conference at Downing Street a short while ago. In the latest migration data released today, net migration fell 20% in the year to June 2024, down from a record high of 906,000 in the previous year. Meanwhile, the cost of the asylum system has soared to more than £5 billion, nearly 12 times the amount spent a decade ago. Sir Keir Starmer's speech comes as the government has announced an immigration deal with Iraq. Iraq is one of the top 10 countries people travelling in small boats come from. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said it is a landmark moment that will tackle small boat crossings at source and help pledge to smash the gangs. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister used his speech to blame the Conservatives for high migration and said his government will turn the page, but he refused to commit to a migration cap.
Previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019.
Now, the Scottish Government has announced all pensioners in Scotland will receive a winter fuel payment next year. From 2025, every pensioner in the country will receive the new benefit, with those in receipt of qualifying benefits like pension credit getting £200 or £300, depending on their age, and wealthier pensioners getting £100. It comes after both the UK and Scottish governments earlier this year axed the universal winter fuel payment, except for those in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits. In other news, former British soldier Daniel Khalif has been found guilty of spying for Iran. Prosecutors say he collected secret and sensitive information on UK special forces and contacted Iranian intelligence soon after joining the army. After 23 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Khalif of breaching the Official Secrets Act and Terrorism Act, but he was cleared of a bomb hoax at his barracks. Khalif escaped Wandsworth Prison in 2023, hiding under a food lorry, but was later caught and admitted breaking out. He claimed he wanted to be a double agent, but his lawyer dismissed it as more Scooby-Doo than 007. And Kirsty Walk has accused Greg Wallace of making sexualised jokes during her time on Celebrity MasterChef in 2011. The former Newsnight host is one of 13 people to have reported inappropriate comments from Wallace over a 17-year period. Walk claims he shared jokes and stories of a sexual nature in front of contestants and crew, which she felt were really in the wrong place. Other allegations include Wallace openly discussing his sex life and making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. The 60-year-old's now stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates the allegations. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Getting a little milder over the next few days. Certainly tonight, not as frosty as last night. Still a few fog patches around. Didn't clear in some places under this area of high pressure. So it's across the eastern parts of England in particular. That's where we've got the lightest winds. That's where we're seeing that fog thickening up. Some not very pleasant conditions out on the roads here. But elsewhere, the cloud is increasing, the breeze is picking up, and it will be a wet night for parts of the north and west of Scotland, particularly over Skye. Very soggy indeed here, and that rain spreading across the Northern Isles too. Much of the mainland, though, dry and with a lot of cloud in the west, more breeze. A much milder night here. Still quite cold in eastern areas with light winds, but that fog should tend to clear away as we go through the early hours. And actually across much of eastern England, fine day to come on Friday. Going to be a bit of a wet start though across Orkney and Shetland. That rain should pull away to the north. Much of the mainland of Scotland starting dry, nowhere near as frosty as this morning, and we're well above freezing in Northern Ireland. Double digits to start the day on Friday here, and we'll have that contrast from east to west, whereas it'll still be cold in the east, much milder further west across England and Wales. As we go through the day, we'll see that cloud continuing to thicken in the west, so quite a grey day here with patches of rain coming into Northern Ireland, turning quite damp here by the afternoon, and more rain pushing back into the Western Isles of Scotland, so again very wet here. But even across western parts of the mainland, we'll see rain creeping in by the end of Friday. The west of Wales, southwest England seeing a few showers. It's a lot milder here, but it will be quite gusty, especially on the west coast of Scotland. Much of eastern England staying fine with hazy sunshine throughout the day. We will see a bit more of that rain just creeping inland as we go through Friday evening, so a few showers cropping up over northern England and into the Midlands. And we'll see a bit of patchy rain this weekend, but a lot of dry weather, mostly cloudy and breezy, but it will be a lot milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. All the traffic on the westbound M62 is currently on stop from Castleford through to Rothwell. Junction 31 to 30, there's a vehicle fire, so delays building. A collision northbound M1 just after Nottingham at 26 means queues building 2, lane 1, the inside lane is combed off. A lane shut 2 in Warwickshire, the southbound M40 just before Longbridge Island, junction 15. That lane shut at the scene of a collision. Stop-start north and southbound though. The northbound M1 just around Milton Keynes 13 up to junction 14. 2 lanes combed off for vehicle fire. They're slow going. And lane 4, the outside lane shut on the anti-clock M25. From junction 27 to Waltham Abbey 26, there's a broken down car there, causing delays on the approaches. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, on the day, and I'm also joined by Chris Hope, our political editor, for our next item, because on the day that Reform UK announced that it had smashed through the 100,000 members mark and claimed that Dame Andrea Jenkins, as one of their own, their former co-deputy leader Ben Habib announced today at the same time that he was to sever his ties with the party. And we can now speak with Ben Habib, who's in Warsaw on his way back to Britain. Ben, welcome to the show. The first question I've got to ask you is, what drove you to quit like this, and why did you do it so publicly?
Well, the final straw for me, the major issue here was some ideological differences with the party, but essentially the party, in my view, not really democratising. They promised they would democratise Zia Yusuf, and I'm glad you got Christopher there, because he did a brilliant interview with Zia Yusuf on the 22nd of August, when Zia said he had the finest legal minds working day and night to produce a constitution that would democratise the party. And actually, when that constitution turned up, it was a reheated document from 2022, which I'd already rejected. It had been changed a bit, but I doubt very much it had any legal minds having looked at it, given the way that it was drafted. And the other promise that Nigel himself made was that the party, which is a limited company, would be converted from one limited by shares to one limited by guarantee. And actually, legally, that's not possible. You can't convert a company limited by shares to one limited by guarantee. And indeed, no applications have been made to the Electoral Commission for any change in structure. And the democratization issue is fundamental to me for reasons that I hope I made plain in my little tweet and video that I put out this morning. And the final straw, I think, for me, with the party seemingly not being prepared to democratize and saying and doing things with which I don't wholly agree, but one could have, had those debates with the party. But the final straw for me was hearing in the last few days that HQ at Reform had told branches, people with whom I've campaigned shoulder to shoulder, people who joined the party because of the leadership that was being delivered by Richard and myself. We galvanized this movement. People that I knew so well had been banned from hearing from me. And I thought, well, if the party takes the view that the people that I've galvanized into this movement alongside Richard shouldn't hear from me, then it's time to leave the party.
OK, Ben, my next question is quite straightforward. Why did you do it today? Today was a day where the 100,000th member was announced. That was Dame Andrea Jenkins. This is a day of fast forward, of action, of positivity for reform. A lot of people are saying, was your timing cynical to try and damage the party on what should have been a good news day?
No, it wasn't cynical. Of course it wasn't cynical. I wanted to make sure Christopher had an opportunity at I didn't know what was being announced today. It was obviously secret until it was announced. But I did want Christopher to have an opportunity to question Zia in public on the declarations that he made on the 22nd of August for the Constitution, which hasn't been delivered, no applications of the Electoral Commission, and indeed to question Nigel on the declaration that you can convert a company limited by shares to one limited by guarantee when you can't do it. These are fundamental issues. These are not things of semantics. They're fundamental points of difference.
Okay, well, Chris Hope's here now. I'd like to fire a question at you as well.
Ben, if we go back to basics here, is there any single policy you don't agree with the reform on at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of areas that I don't agree on. The first, and perhaps the most basic, and again, it's not semantics, is I don't think Brexit's been done. And Nigel, the leader of Reform, says Brexit's been done, but we just simply haven't put enough distance between ourselves and the EU. And at no level can I agree with that declaration, because we've left Northern Ireland behind. What we voted for was for the UK to leave the EU, not for Great Britain to leave. Okay. And we're hitched at the hip with the EU in a whole load of areas, including net zero, ECHR, etc. Yeah.
It's just for me. I mean, you're talking about companies and democracy, and we get that. The Tory party is hardly very democratic, and I've been covering that one for 20 years. I mean, for me, is this not about egos? Does it not go back to the brass tacks that you aren't at the top of the party, other people are? They're there because they're MPs, you aren't an MP, you want people to listen to you, and then you haven't got those top roles in the party, and that's why you're off.
No, Christopher, I couldn't care less whether I've got a top role in the party or not. I was extremely reluctant to join Reform. I didn't want to be in a political party. I'm quite capable of campaigning outside a political party, and I've got no desire to get my bum on a green seat. If getting my bum on a green seat helped the country from the precipice on which it helped save the country from the precipice on which I think it is now standing, then I would put my bum on a green seat. But that's not my aim in life. I'm 59 years old. I run a perfectly good business. I'm well off. I'm doing this because I have an absolute belief that the country is facing an existential threat constitutionally, democratically, economically, and culturally. I'm not in it for political advancement. I don't really. I use the media to the extent that I need to in order to deliver my message. I'm not hooked on the media, and so no, that's not the right answer.
Okay. Ben, Nigel Farage was asked about this earlier on. Nigel Farage was asked about this earlier on, and he said, I'd rather Ben had stayed, but he chose not to. Here's what I think could perhaps happen. You love your country. Nigel Farage loves his country. I think really you love each other. You've had a bit of a tiff. You've had a bit of a falling out. Isn't the most sensible thing to do? Stop falling out in public. Stop airing your dirty laundry. Kiss and make up and do the right thing by the country and get on with some blooming business.
I love you, Martin. Of course, this has nothing to do with personalities. I love Nigel. If Nigel walked in the room when you and I were there, we could all have a big hug. You know, it's got nothing to do with that. It's about doing what's not politically expedient, but doing what's right. And the country has been hoodwinked so many times. People have promised this, promised that, not delivered it. And I need to be absolutely certain that the policies being adopted by Reform and the way that the party itself is governed is consistent with what is required in order to save the United Kingdom from the threats that I think it's facing. And if Nigel wants to text me and say, look, Martin, you and me, we're going out for a group hug. Bring Richard along. Let's do it. Let's have a group hug.
I'll always be up for a group hug. And now you said it in public, I'm afraid it probably might happen. Very quickly, you said before you liked the cut of the jib of Kemi Badenoch, and yet figures came out today that 1 million came in the country. Might you consider defecting to the Conservatives?
Look, I never said I liked the cut of the jib of Kemi Badenoch.
Yes,
I think
did.
I put out a tweet. saying that she was, when she was standing, she was the better candidate than Jenrick, because I didn't believe his Damaskene conversion. And she said some really good things yesterday when she made a speech. But of course, the Tories always say that. Well, she said something Nigel didn't say. Nigel was reluctant to confirm that he was concerned at the rate at which the demography of the country was changing. Kemi volunteered that yesterday. And I'm very concerned at the rate of demographic change. And, you know, it's the other side of the same coin of the cultural damage that's being done to the UK. Look, the Tories are famous for saying stuff and doing nothing, or doing the opposite, frankly. You know, I'm in it for the United Kingdom, for the proud, sovereign, democratic unit that is the United Kingdom, and I'm going to go on fighting that cause. And if Reform should democratise, if Nigel wants that group hug, let's have it, and let's get on with life.
I think that is you, very much with the rose between your teeth. You more or less got the champagne on ice. Let's kiss and make up. There's still hope. I'm glass half full, particularly if you're buying Ben Habib. Superb to have on the show, as ever. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Great stuff. And thank you as well to you, Chris. So I think they've just had a bit of a tip here.
Yeah.
I'm an optimist. Let's see.
This is cigarette paper on policy, and that's what matters.
If that, they agree. I mean, coming up, animal rights activists have demanded the sly old fox pub in Birmingham change its name because it is derogatory towards foxes. You couldn't make it up. What have they been drinking? And me. That's coming next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy
is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Donna Ida, who joins us now. And Donna, you look spectacular in your gorgeous denim jumpsuit.
Thank you.
And accessories. And it's important, isn't it, sometimes, just to keep things simple?
I always keep things simple. I travel a lot, I work long hours, and I don't want to think too much about what I'm wearing. So for me, one and done is perfect. Good accessories, fresh hair, nice makeup, and you can go anywhere, including GB News when you didn't know what was happening.
There we go.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Straight off the plane.
Can we ask you some of our top denim questions?
Yes.
Because Stephen Dixon, the presenter of The Breakfast Show who's just on, said that double denim to him is an absolute no-go.
Oh, what does he
Is that true?
Don't have him on again, darling.
OK. We're telling me
I
fact.
love double denim.
Really?
I love it. I think it is so cool.
Does it have to be a different
I was going to say
tones?
double denim, same colour.
Or same
I
tones?
like the... For me, I actually do like the same. Think Saint Laurent 70s. There's an amazing one that we're doing that's going to look great on you in the new season. The Joan Jean, we've got the City Slicker shirt. Oh, it's amazing. If it's done well, it's perfect. And I like it in a paler blue, but a good mid to dark. Very chic.
Yeah, you go.
No, well, I was just thinking, little old me, not quite sure
You look amazing
what to wear
in
this
it.
morning. How
was a
do
bit
guys
stressed.
pull off denim?
For me, if I was dressing you, I would have put you in a pair of jeans this morning with his amazing jumper. Gorgeous watch.
Black, blue?
Black denim, I do like. Men don't like it so much. Men like charcoal denim.
Oh, I don't like grey.
Charcoal. I love grey, and the best seller for men is charcoal denim.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the animal rights group PETA has been accused of undermining real issues after asking a pub to change its name, claiming it is offensive to foxes. The animal rights group wrote to the owners of the Sly Old Fox, F-O-X, on Hurst Street, Birmingham, saying that the name was derogatory, and instead they asked them to consider swapping Sly with Clever. Well, joining me now is the owner of the Old Bulldog pub, Mike Newman. And Mike, welcome to the show. I understand you had the Animal Rights Brigade rattling your cage over the name of your boozer. What on earth are the wokerati drinking?
Well, there you go. But I wish they'd do it to us more often, because we had a surge in business once they sent us that stupid letter saying that Bulldog wasn't an appropriate name. And all the guys in the pub are watching tonight. So we're looking forward to some good knock-around stuff on the idiocy of woke.
And presumably, if there's any justice, Mike, your sales went through the roof, because if you try and ban something, if you try and stop people having fun, then what people do, they rally around, they get their trotters round through your door and they start supping more.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, look, I think people in this country are fed up with the woke agenda. It's gone too far, and people are tired of things like the perception of a two-tier criminal justice system. You know, they are tired with all the bad things that woke has brought. This is a moderate nation, and when something happens like this, you wouldn't think that this country had just taken a punishment beating of a budget from the Labour government, you know, and people are worrying about stuff like this. It's ridiculous. So I'm very happy to stand up here on behalf of all pub owners everywhere who are taking a hit from things like this in terms of reputation. And, you know, we need to push on hard against woke.
Mike, you know what's just struck me there about you, which is beautiful? Same as this Mike Westwood fellow who started the petition. He's a pub landlord too. I think pub landlords are some of the most sensible and switched on and politically savvy people in Britain. I'd like to get people like you involved in politics. Would you fancy a go?
Well, I have done, actually. I was Conservative candidate for Wolverhampton West in the general election. And I am also a candidate for Staffs County Council in my hometown of Stafford. So I'm very much involved. And one point I want to make very clearly is that I'm as anti-woke as the next person. But I think it is a major mistake to vote reform on the basis of woke. Because if you vote reform, you will let in a Labour government, avoid letting a Labour government, you let in a Labour council in Staffordshire and other places, stick with the Conservatives.
Have you been drinking already? Mike, have you been drinking already? Because a lot of people are basically saying that the Conservatives, look at that, 1 million people came through the borders when they were in power. You know, come on, this... I know a pint and politics goes well together, but on a serious point, British culture is under attack. Bulldogs are a part of our amazing heritage. When they go after things like this, they've completely lost the plot, and I think this belittles the nation and they're losing their minds.
Well, I think that's right. But look, I absolutely refute the fact that the Conservatives are anti-woke. And I think that we've got to look forward, not back. And we've seen very clearly, people understandably were ticked off at us during the general election. They decided to vote reform as pushback against what they perceived that we hadn't done. And look what's happened. A Labour government. People have to ask themselves, do they want Labour county councils coming up? Do they want Labour running other things simply because people went towards reform? I'm a right-wing Conservative, and I'm proud to be that. Stick with us. We'll look after you.
OK, we've got to go. A good pint of politics there with a dash of common sense on top. Thank you very much. That's the owner of the Old Bulldog Pub, Mike Newman. Thank you very, very much. Now, plenty more coming up in the next hour, including all the reaction to the Prime Minister's announcement earlier on immigration, calling it an open borders experiment, an astonishing attack. Full analysis on that with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But now, here's your weather, and it's Alex Deakin.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Getting a little milder over the next few days. Certainly tonight, not as frosty as last night. Still a few fog patches around. Didn't clear in some places under this area of high pressure. So it's across the eastern parts of England in particular. That's where we've got the lightest winds. That's where we're seeing that fog thickening up. Some not very pleasant conditions out on the roads here. But elsewhere, the cloud is increasing, the breeze is picking up, and it will be a wet night for parts of the north and west of Scotland, particularly over Skye. Very soggy indeed here, and that rain spreading across the Northern Isles too. Much of the mainland, though, dry and with a lot of cloud in the west, more breeze. A much milder night here. Still quite cold in eastern areas with light winds, but that fog should tend to clear away as we go through the early hours. And actually across much of eastern England, fine day to come on Friday. Going to be a bit of a wet start, though, across Orkney and Shetland. That rain should pull away to the north. Much of the mainland of Scotland starting dry. Nowhere near as frosty as this morning. And we're well above freezing in Northern Ireland. Double digits to start the day on Friday here. And we'll have that contrast from east to west, whereas it'll still be cold in the east, much milder further west across England and Wales. As we go through the day, we'll see that cloud continuing to thicken in the west. So quite a grey day here with patches of rain coming into Northern Ireland. Turning quite damp here by the afternoon, and more rain pushing back into the Western Isles of Scotland. So again, very wet here. But even across western parts of the mainland, we'll see rain creeping in by the end of Friday. The west of Wales, southwest England, seeing a few showers. It's a lot milder here, but it will be quite gusty, especially on the west coast of Scotland. Much of eastern England staying fine with hazy sunshine throughout the day. We will see a bit more of that rain just creeping inland as we go through Friday evening, so a few showers cropping up over northern England and into the Midlands. And we'll see a bit of patchy rain this weekend, but a lot of dry weather, mostly cloudy and breezy, but it will be a lot milder.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Big queues on the westbound M62 building this afternoon. Now, 2 lanes are coned off Castleford to Rothwell. Junction 31 to 30, there's a vehicle fire queuing back to the A1M at 32A. Also slow through Castleford and Pontefract as traffic diverts. All the traffic in Worcestershire on the northbound M5 being held at Junction 5 for Droitwich, causing queues back towards 7 for Worcester and Evesham at the scene of a collision. Indeed, looking slow both sides of the carriageway. Stop-start, a lane shut southbound M40 before 15 for Longbridge Island. There's queues both ways at the scene of a southbound collision. 2 lanes shut northbound M1 around Milton Keynes, 13 to 14. Queues for vehicle fire. And London-bound the M20, the entry slip road blocked at 7 for Maidstone. Delays there, a collision being recovered.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. On today's show, the Prime Minister lays the blame at the door of the Conservative Party as net immigration soars to nearly 1 million.
Government were running an open borders experiment.
And elsewhere today, Nigel Farage's Reform UK party announced it has smashed through the 100,000 membership barrier, but then sensationally unveiled the former Tory minister Dame Andrea Jenkins as their latest big-name defection, who blasted the Tories are a sinking ship. And animal rights activists have demanded that the sly old Fox pub in Birmingham change its name because it is derogatory towards foxes. What are they drinking? We get all the reaction from all the latest war on woke, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show, you sly old foxes. Now, it's one of those days where you think, have the lunatics taken over the asylum? The immigration figures came out this morning, 902,000. But here's the point. 178,000 were found that had been forgotten about previously, added to the number. And when it was added to the number, it meant they could say, hey, the numbers are down. No, the old numbers were completely wrong. Where are they getting these figures from? Are they making them up? Is Diane Abbott in charge of the calculator? Who's at blame? Is it the ONS? Is it the Conservative Party? Where does the buck stop? Do we know who's in the country? Do we know how many people there are? Do we know what backgrounds they have? Is it time for an emergency census? Do we have any idea How many people are in Britain? Do we have any idea at all how many are coming through our open borders? Do we have any idea how to stop it? These are the big questions we're trying to address throughout the show. And get in touch if you've got any ideas. I'd like to know, because I don't think those in charge of the country seem to know what they're on about. GBNews.com/your say. That's the way to do it. Now here's your headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has accused the previous government of running an open borders experiment while giving a press conference at Downing Street today. In the latest migration data released today, net migration fell 20% in the year to June 2024, down from a record high of 906,000 in the previous year. Meanwhile, the cost of the asylum system has soared to more than £5 billion, nearly 12 times the amount spent a decade ago. Sir Keir Starmer's speech comes as the government has announced an immigration deal with Iraq. Iraq is one of the top 10 countries people travelling in small boats come from. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said it is a landmark moment that will tackle small boat crossings at source and help the pledge to smash the gangs. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister used his speech to blame the Conservatives for high migration and said his government will turn the page but refused to commit to a migration cap.
Previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019.
The Scottish Government has announced all pensioners in Scotland will receive a winter fuel payment next year. From 2025, every pensioner in the country will receive the new benefit, with those in receipt of qualifying benefits like pension credit getting £200 or £300, depending on their age, and wealthier pensioners getting £100. It comes after both the UK and Scottish governments earlier this year axed the universal winter fuel payment, except for those in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits. And staying in Scotland, hundreds of farmers have staged a rally outside Holyrood to voice concerns about the future of the sector. They are calling for an increase in funding for agricultural support when the Scottish Government announces its budget next week. Our GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is outside the Scottish Parliament.
We've turned out to speak to the hundreds and hundreds of farmers outside the Scottish Parliament today. They're not just protesting changes to inheritance tax law, but also the new formula of which agricultural funding now comes under the block grant, as opposed to the old ring-fenced money which secured money for agriculture here in Scotland. Now farmers are angry that they have to fight for funding alongside the likes of education and healthcare. Today farmers are feeling extremely worried about what will become of their farms and whether or not their children and their children's children.
Former British soldier Daniel Khalif has been found guilty of spying for Iran. Prosecutors say he collected secret and sensitive information on UK special forces and contacted Iranian intelligence soon after joining the army. After 23 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Khalif of breaching the Official Secrets Act and the Terrorism Act, but he was cleared of a bomb hoax at his barracks. Khalif escaped Wandsworth Prison in 2023, hiding under a food lorry, but was later caught and admitted breaking out. He claimed he wanted to be a double agent, but his lawyer dismissed it as more Scooby-Doo than 007. In other news, Kirsty Walk has accused Greg Wallace of making sexualised jokes during her time on Celebrity MasterChef in 2011. The former Newsnight host is one of 13 people to have reported inappropriate comments from Wallace over a 17-year period. Walk claims that he shared stories and jokes of a sexual nature in front of contestants and crew, which she felt were really in the wrong place. Other allegations include Wallace openly discussing his sex life and making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. The 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates the allegations. And Reform UK says its membership has soared to over 100,000, up from just 15,000 last year. Party leader Nigel Farage slammed the Tories and Labour over what he called horrendous net migration figures, despite a 20% drop in the last year. And in a major announcement for the party, former Conservative Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins has joined and will stand as Reform's candidate for Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, in this past hour, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, gave a press conference reacting to the astonishing migration figures that were released earlier this morning. And Mr Starmer, on numerous occasions, continually laid the blame at the door of the Conservative Party and vowed to secure Britain's borders.
Previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019.
Well, there's loads to go through there, and to do that, I'm now joined in our studio by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, you were at the event earlier on where Sir Keir Starmer gave the announcement. I just want to focus on the figures first. An incredible figure. Top-line figure, 906,000, and that was magically upgraded by 178,000 they forgot about or didn't know about or got wrong last time around. Yesterday, Kenny Badenoch laid into Sir Keir Starmer, admitting they made mistakes, but it would get worse under Labour. Today, Sir Keir Starmer put the boot into the Tories. The public, meanwhile, are groaning a sigh. It's like, can you not just get your head around this, a lot of you, and sort out our borders?
Kenny Badenoch yesterday, the new Tory leader, said we got it wrong, which we have to take on face value. But frankly, that party was in power for 14 years and got nothing right on migration. We go back to 2010, we heard David Cameron say cutting immigration, net migration, legally arrived people here to below 100,000 a year. That never happened through 4 elections, and then that was the end of that. So, you know, one can only hope, frankly, that Keir Starmer gets a grip on it. Right now, it's all about politics. That figure, 906,000 arriving here in the earth of June 2023, I mean, that's nearly 1 million people, extraordinary number. The ONS, the Office for National Statistics, found an extra 106,000. They've added it on. Keir Starmer didn't want to go to a blame game on that. He said that simply it's a big number, whether it's 800,000 or nearly 1 million. He called it an open border experiment, he said. It happened by design, not by default. A one-nation experiment in broken borders, he said. Unprecedented off the scale. Back onto him, though, he talks about a white paper. That's a big government law to tackle, get a grip on the issues of net migration and illegal migration too. They're going to look at the points-based system, ban employers from hiring foreign workers, British jobs for British workers. We're old enough to remember that was Gordon Brown's big play back in 2008, 2009. I asked him, though, for GB News, the question I think our viewers want to know the answer to. Enough all the talk, Keir Starmer. What is a figure you're happy with? What is an acceptable net migration figure? Here's what I had to say, and more importantly, how he answered.
You want net migration to fall significantly, Prime Minister. The OBR, which forecasts these numbers, forecasts 315,000 net migrants arriving here, but until 2028, 2029, nearly twice the number in 2019. What level are you happy with? Will you cut it back to 2019 levels? And when will that happen by?
Chris, that we want and are intending to drive these numbers down. They're far too high. They signal a loss of control. And that's what these policies are designed to achieve, and that's why the White Paper will be published imminently, bringing them together as a plan. I'm not going to pluck an arbitrary number because that has been tried many years in a row and it has achieved absolutely nothing. And what I'm not going to do with the British public is adopt an approach which we know has not succeeded and pretend that it's going to succeed. I think the days of fiction and pretending there are easy answers are over. These are the days of hard graft.
And in terms of the numbers, Sir Keir Starmer's response there was basically how long's a piece of string. We're not going to give you a number. I'll give you some numbers, Chris. Right, the amount that came in, 906,000, that's 3 Newcastles. Right, that's
in one year.
3 Newcastles. The rounding error that they lost down the back of the sofa in Downing Street or the ONS or wherever, everyone's passing the buck on that. 178,000. That is a town the size of Reading. Just like cooey, here I am.
Just found hiding behind the bushes.
Just turned up. And it's like, what on earth does that say about their ability to, A, accurately record them, and B, track them, and who the hell are they?
What I worry about, I think, and Kemi Badenoch gave a bit of this away yesterday when we asked her to... I said, you've cocked up for 14 years, why should anyone believe what you're saying anymore? And she said, well, in my world, the business department, we increased salaries and then we thought we'd have got a grip on it. She wasn't clearly aware of the health service or the farmers maybe wanting more people to pick vegetables in the fields. So I think what may be a good thing from this government is to get a white paper, get a cross-government feel for what's going on. You can look at all the departments and work as one government rather than a silo approach towards this. But I will say, finally, Martin, if you look at what happened in the budget, alongside that budget came out forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility. They forecast 315,000 arrivals here net until the end of the decade, 2028, 2029. That number times 5 is 1.5 million. That is the number of new homes this government wants to build during its time in government, just to stand still. Forget the housing shortage, just to manage the numbers of new arrivals that will soak up the entire new housing stock under the Labour government. It is not acceptable for our viewers and our listeners and many, many more voters.
Well said, Chris Hope, and well done for keep asking all the best questions in journalism. Chris Hope, that's our political editor. Let's keep this one going now because I'm joined by the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe. Wolfie, welcome to the show. You no doubt watched that press conference yesterday with Kemi Badenoch and the one today. You're thinking, Gordon Bennett, nobody seems to be taking a responsibility for this, continually asking for targets. We're not getting any targets, and they seem to be blaming each other. And meanwhile, the great British public are sitting here banging our heads on our desk saying, when are we ever going to take back control of our borders?
Well, good afternoon, Martin. I know that we have campaigned long and hard for a government to be responsible, sensible and honest about taking back control of our borders. We watched them argue that in the Brexit referendum. We believed that they would do so. When I wrote the fair, flexible and forward-thinking immigration policy that was taken up by Vote Leave and other parties and then enacted partly by the Conservative government, we also believed then that they would take back control and manage our borders. But today we are seeing once again their failures and their lack of commitment to the word of the British people. And I think that says a lot about modern politicians and why people are feeling so disheartened. They said one thing, they've done another. And actually, to be fair on Keir Starmer today, and I'm not often so clear about him, he was absolutely right to say what he did about the Conservative Party. They did allow millions of people to come into this country since 2016, and it's an experiment that has failed.
Stephen Wolfe, I'm joined by Chris Hope, our political editor. He has a question for you.
Stephen, great to see you. Of course, you were a UKIP politician in the past. Now, the Reform UK Party is saying they would adopt a one-in, one-out policy, and I'm often trying to get to the bottom of that. It seems unrealistic to offer that to voters. Is that possible, do you think?
I mean, I've looked at that policy and there is a feasibility that you could have one in, one out. But if they want to really reduce the numbers of net migration, they have to go beyond that, Chris, because when you look at what the Office of National Statistics are saying, I mean, I looked again today just to clarify their figures. They say our population today is 68.3 million with an estimate of 70 million by the mid-2026. But with these ONS figures that we've got today, we're actually already sitting at 69.3 million. We're at the 2026 targets now. And all their estimates for the next 10 years are based on net migration of 325,000. You've seen the numbers today. It's 728. So that would suggest that in 10 years, the population of Britain would be 80 million. That's London and Manchester combined in 10 years.
Wow.
Reform would have to go much harder to reduce those numbers.
Is it possible to do one in, one out, is the point? Because it's all very well saying that from a position of 5 MPs and 100,000 members, but if you're in government, very hard to try and make those numbers work and not cripple the health service, for example, with labour shortages.
Yes, I mean, it was. I mean, when I did write the fair, flexible and forward-thinking immigration policy, we had zero unskilled migration come in, and we showed how you could keep health and care homes in particular, farming as protected areas and still reduce the numbers to 50,000. Of course, that's unsustainable now. You will never be able to do that in one way. But there are ways that you can do that. You start immediately by restricting any family reunification whatsoever across any, whether it's those who are coming in on visas and those who are coming in at universities. You then ensure that as people either die or move out of the country, you look at the areas of our country that do need employment and only restrict it to them with visas, allowing them to stay, but only for short periods of time, pretty much like Dubai or the Middle East. That's one way of attacking this particular issue.
OK, Stephen Wolfe, I want to ask you one final question. The figures are so wildly different. Is it 728,000? Is it 906,000? It's like mystically out of nowhere, 178,000 crop up. Who's doing the maths? Diane Abbott? Who's in charge? Who's actually doing the recording? Is it the ONS? Is it the government? And I want to ask you this. Do we have any real idea of how many people are in this country? Do we know what types of people? And is the only solution for this like some kind of emergency census to actually know who people are and how many of them are here?
I think, first and foremost, I will be fair on the ONS. These are figures that they are producing. They have difficulties in actually getting it accurate. First of all, for many, many years, we had them just with people standing at airports doing surveys to actually calculate who's coming in and out. They have improved the methodology, and I've been monitoring that, but they recognise they're a long way away. And so that's the problem, Martin. They cannot accurately give us how many people are coming in with the current methodology that they're using, which is why I'm not surprised that they've had to revise those figures from last month. We do need to have some proper surveys, but we probably have to move to a system where anybody coming into this country who's a non-UK citizen needs to have some sort of identity card so that we can actually calculate those coming in and those who are leaving.
OK, Stephen Wolfe, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, quickly before we move on, Chris Hope, you've got a breaking news line from the Conservatives on this.
That's right. So Chris Philp is the Shadow Home Secretary, Martin. He now they're blaming the Keir Starmer, they say, for suspending their increase to the family visa salary threshold to prevent more migrants coming here. They say they know numbers are too high, and that's why Karen Badenoch has set out under her leadership how they'll learn from past mistakes, a strict cap on numbers, making citizenship a privilege, not a right, zero tolerance for foreign criminals, and a legal deterrent for illegal migration. And finally, it's abundantly clear, Chris Philp says, that Keir Starmer, a man who believes immigration controls are racist, they say, has no plan, no desire to tackle the high levels of migration, nor confront illegal migration. I think while a politicians row, the problem remains. It will infuriate, I think, viewers and listeners.
The blame game continues. Just get on with the job. Chris Hope, superb, always getting on with your job. Excellent. Thank you as ever. Now, there's plenty more fallout to today's immigration stats and press conferences by the Prime Minister and Nigel Farage. But tonight, Suella Braverman will join Christopher Hope on State of the Nation. Magnificent. And Dame Andrea Jenkins is also live on Patrick Christie tonight. That's from 9 p.m. State of the Nation, of course, from 8 p.m. here on GB News. Now, brace yourselves. It's time for our biggest and greatest Great British giveaway ever this year, and your chance to win 50 grand in cool, hard, tax-free cash. It's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away at GB News, and it could be yours. And here's all the details for your chance to win this whopping, juicy 50 grand tax-free moolah.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck now. Coming up, Nigel Farage's Reform UK today announced it has smashed through the 100,000 membership barrier and then sensationally unveiled former Tory minister Dame Andrea Jenkins as their latest defection. And she blasted the Tories are a sinking ship. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, British News Channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Restaurant St. Bart's executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St. Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I mean, I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
So one of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, you know, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea...
You have a lot of farms near St. Bart's, which is in the heart of the City of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions, who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the former Conservative Minister, Andrea Jenkins, has joined Reform UK, and she says the British people feel betrayed.
To the people of Greater Lincolnshire, in me you have someone who will fight for you. I always do what is right, and I always take the common sense approach. We stand today, the British people feel betrayed. Our culture, our values and our communities are under siege.
And leader Nigel Farage and Reform UK spoke on their party's growth and professionalisation with news that 100,000 members have now joined the party. So are Reform moving in the right direction? And joining me now to discuss this, the former Labour advisor, great friend of the show, Matthew Talbot. Matt, always a pleasure to have your company here in Westminster. Can we start with that speech from Keir Starmer earlier on? Because I was watching it in real time here, and I've got to say, I didn't really recognise the person that was speaking, Keir Starmer, who was beloved of open borders, campaigning for a second referendum, campaigning for the people's vote. Freedom of movement was an intrinsic core principle of that. Today, saying the three main priorities of any country is the NHS, the economy and controlling our borders. Who is the real Sir Keir Starmer?
You'd have to ask him, and I don't even know if he'd know himself. I think I was shocked at the tone, I must admit, from a Labour point of view. And actually, as a Labour sort of person, it made me feel quite uncomfortable. Yeah. This isn't the sort of stuff that we preach as the Labour Party, as a progressive party. I do think it's a wise move because he's going to come under attack. I think his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, has had previous experience of this, not quite at the level of number 10, but there's the famous stories of him taking on the BNP in Barking and seeing where people get fed up. So people were turning into sort of an anti-immigration attitude in Barking when it was because their area was declining, and the idea was if we fix things, people will feel better about things, and their communities will foster around them. So I think it's a savvy move. I don't necessarily like it, but you've got to almost... I think he's been clever at getting the 14 years thing in. Again, you've got to try and get as much of that out as you can. Ultimately, the proof's going to be in the pudding. Whether immigration goes up or down, if people don't feel any better, he's going to be out in 5 years. And it comes down to trust. Yeah. And clearly we saw yesterday, and I thought you saw it as well, an astonishing press conference from Kemi Badenoch, basically, we got everything wrong. We broke every promise in the book. Yeah, you did, and laid out a litany of failures about the fact that there are millions of people in Britain and we don't really know who are here. Pointed out over 1 million people cannot speak English at all. Well, all of this happened on the Conservative watch. The big question now is, can things improve under the Labour Party? It's all fine to do a kind of paint by numbers, I'm a pro-British nationalist kind of speech, but will the electorate buy it? Because it's all come down to previous performance, and the Labour Party has always been associated with much more liberalisation, much more let more immigrants come in. So can we trust them on this, or is it more performative politics? And that brings us around to, will this open the sea, as it were, for Reform UK to come through the middle? Because say what you like about Nigel Farage, he's always been consistent on this point. I think people will have to see the change for themselves. That's where the trust comes from. And if they feel better, you've seen over in America, you can say what you want unless people feel better, and it comes back to the economy and whether people can afford bread and eggs and whether they can get in their doctors, same day and stuff like that. I think the fact that, me and you seem to be shocked, Joe Bloggs that doesn't pay any attention at home, not GB News viewers or listeners, obviously, but those that don't pay attention until election time, may be sold on this sort of stuff. They know, they won't know Keir Starmer's previous history of the last 9 years of being a politician. Does it open up the road for reform? Potentially. I've always thought they were Labour's biggest threat, particularly in those red wall, whatever you want to call them, working class seats where people like me and you are from. Yeah. And I think we're living in a time at the moment which is very interesting because people don't like politicians, and at the moment the Conservatives and Labour sound like politicians, and I think that's where there is room for Nigel or any other alternative that seems to come forward to sort of paint themselves as a real change candidate, because this change might not be seen by the electorate in 4 or 5 years. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for coming in. Always an absolute delight to have your expertise. And that's Matthew Talbot, former Labour advisor. Superb. There's lots more stuff to come between now and 6 o'clock, including Greg Wallace steps away from the BBC show MasterChef because it's been reported that the former Newsnight host Kirsty Wark is now among 13 people who have accused the presenter of making inappropriate sexual comments. More on this next. But first, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
It's 5:31. These are your headlines. The Prime Minister has accused the previous government of running an open borders experiment while giving a press conference at Downing Street. In the latest migration data released today, net migration fell 20% in the year to June 2024, down from a record high of 906,000 in the previous year. Meanwhile, the cost of the asylum system has soared to more than £5 billion, nearly 12 times the amount spent a decade ago. Sir Keir Starmer's speech comes as the government has announced an immigration deal with Iraq. The Prime Minister used his speech to blame the Conservatives for high migration and said his government will turn the page, but refused to commit to a migration cap. Meanwhile, the Shadow Home Secretary has responded, saying the Prime Minister has no plan and no desire to tackle the high levels of migration. Chris Philp says under Tory leader Kemi Badenoch's Tories will learn from the past mistakes and adopt a new approach to lowering immigration. In other news, the Scottish Government has announced all pensioners in Scotland will receive a winter fuel payment next year. From 2025, every pensioner in the country will receive the new benefit, with those in receipt of qualifying benefits like pension credit getting £200 or £300, depending on their age, and wealthier pensioners getting £100. It comes after both the UK and Scottish governments earlier this year axed the universal winter fuel payment, except for those in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits. Kirsty Walk has accused Greg Wallace of making sexualised jokes during her time on Celebrity MasterChef in 2011. The former Newsnight host is one of 13 people to have reported inappropriate comments from Wallace over a 17-year period. Walk claims that he shared stories and jokes of a sexual nature in front of contestants and crew, which she felt were really in the wrong place. Other allegations include Wallace openly discussing his sex life and making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. The 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates the allegations. And some breaking news. A baby whose remains were found in a field in Manchester was a newborn girl who has been named as Ava. That's according to police. Officers said the baby's cause of death remains unascertained pending further investigation after a post-mortem on Wednesday. Police have reiterated their appeal for her mum, her family, or anyone who knows anything about what may have happened to Ava to come forward. And the Prince and Princess of Wales paid tribute to teenager Liz Hatton, who died on Wednesday after battling a rare form of cancer. In the tweet, the couple say, "We are so sorry to hear that Liz Hatton has sadly passed away. It was an honour to have met such a brave and humble young woman. Our thoughts and prayers are with Liz's parents, Vicky and Aaron, and her brother, Matteo, at this unimaginably difficult time." Last month, the 17-year-old was pictured hugging the Princess of Wales at Windsor Castle after being invited to take pictures there. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Getting a little milder over the next few days. Certainly tonight, not as frosty as last night. Still a few fog patches around. Didn't clear in some places under this area of high pressure. So it's across the eastern parts of England in particular. That's where we've got the lightest winds. That's where we're seeing that fog thickening up. Some not very pleasant conditions out on the roads here. But elsewhere, the cloud is increasing, the breeze is picking up, and it will be a wet night for parts of the north and west of Scotland, particularly over Skye. Very soggy indeed here, and that rain spreading across the Northern Isles too. Much of the mainland, though, dry and with a lot of cloud in the west, more breeze. A much milder night here. Still quite cold in eastern areas with light winds, but that fog should tend to clear away as we go through the early hours. And actually across much of eastern England, fine day to come on Friday. Going to be a bit of a wet start though across Orkney and Shetland. That rain should pull away to the north. Much of the mainland of Scotland starting dry, nowhere near as frosty as this morning, and we're well above freezing in Northern Ireland. Double digits to start the day on Friday here, and we'll have that contrast from east to west, whereas it'll still be cold in the east, much milder further west across England and Wales. As we go through the day, we'll see that cloud continuing to thicken in the west. So quite a grey day here with patches of rain coming into Northern Ireland, turning quite damp here by the afternoon, and more rain pushing back into the Western Isles of Scotland. So again, very wet here. But even across western parts of the mainland, we'll see rain creeping in by the end of Friday. The west of Wales, southwest England, seeing a few showers. It's a lot milder here, but it will be quite gusty, especially on the west coast of Scotland. Much of eastern England staying fine with hazy sunshine throughout the day. We will see a bit more of that rain just creeping inland as we go through Friday evening, so a few showers cropping up over northern England and into the Midlands. And we'll see a bit of patchy rain this weekend, but a lot of dry weather, mostly cloudy and breezy, but it will be a lot milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Severe delays in County Durham this evening for the A1M. The motorway remains closed northbound from junction 59 to 60 between Aycliffe and Bradbury at the scene of a serious accident. The M1 in Leicestershire is blocked southbound from junction 23 at Loughborough to 22. The Ashby to Lazouche turn-off, a lorry's on fire. That's causing lengthy queues on the approach. In Worcestershire, the M5 is blocked northbound at junction 5. The A38 Droitwich Wychbold exit. There's been an accident involving a lorry. Surrounding routes are also solid. The M4 in Berkshire is down to 2 lanes eastbound from junction 5 to 4B. The 2 inside lanes are blocked off approaching the M25. At the scene of an accident in Somerset, the A30 closed on Henford Hill at Yeovil for emergency repairs, and trains remain suspended in Devon from Crediton to Oakhampton because of a fallen tree and the flooding. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, former Newsnight host Kirsty Walk is now among 13 people accusing MasterChef presenter Greg Wallace of making inappropriate sexual comments. And the 60-year-old stepped down from the cooking show as the BBC investigates allegations of historical misconduct. And the show's production company says the complaints were made this week and an external review is now underway. Greg Wallace, who's been with MasterChef since 2005, is fully cooperating with the investigation, and he's previously denied claims from 2018, saying they were promptly investigated and found that he hadn't made any inappropriate comments. Well, join me now to discuss this, the former New Magazine and Star Magazine editor, Libby Ayres. Libby, but welcome to the show. Libby, not the first time that Greg has been in a pickle. This time it seems pretty serious. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when you've got more than one person making accusations, then the BBC have to take it seriously. And also when it's one of their own presenters, then they've got no choice. They can't have a situation when they're being accused of protecting their talent. They really have to step in here. And I think that it sounds like Greg is, he's helping them out, and he's stepped back, and I think that's the right decision on his behalf, and I think it's the right decision on behalf of the BBC to investigate all the accusations fully.
And Libby, there are two things which are very ominous here. Of course, we have the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. It's a central tenet of all the British legal system, but there are a large number of complainants, and Kirsty Walk, of course, Kirsty Walk is considered to be BBC royalty, great seniority, very, very highly regarded, and of course, well known for her feminist credentials, speaking out like this. So the calibre and the number of the complainants must be a grave concern for Mr. Wallace.
I think so, and I think on Instagram this afternoon, Rod Stewart's weighed in, and he's made some accusations as well about how Greg Wallace treated his wife. So, and then, calling him tubby and bullheaded and ill-mannered. So I think, we may find that this is one of those situations where they've got, 13 accusations being made at the moment. Maybe there will be more to come. The accusations are, I think everyone has a right to go to work and feel comfortable, and not to have people making off-colour jokes. And, maybe people, they can see, I've been on X this afternoon and having a look at what people are saying. And, there's lots of people saying, oh, it's a storm in a teacup. But other people saying, no. Kirsty Walk is one person, as you say, she's BBC royalty. But what happens when it's a contestant, who's not a celebrity, it's a civilian, as they're called, who's in there, and an off-colour comment is made, and you just have to laugh and go along with it. That's the kind of thing that the BBC just won't want to be happening. So really, they've done the right thing.
Lebby, we should point out that Mr Wallace is fully cooperating with this investigation. He stepped away. He's previously denied the allegations. Of course, allegations made by Rod Stewart on social media. He hasn't had a chance to respond to them, so let's put them where they are for now. But it's not the first time that Greg Wallace has been involved in this. He's previously had very public struggles with alcohol, and there have been other issues going on. So it just feels, does it not, that there's a lot of momentum, a lot of evidence here, and this could be a pretty serious situation for him to try and dig his way out of.
Yeah, I mean, once we know more about what those exact accusations actually are, obviously we've heard that there were sexualised jokes, there were remarks about clothing, about taking his top off, that kind of thing. I know, obviously, earlier on this year, there was nothing wrong with the interview that he gave, but he gave an interview about his day, which went viral for the fact that he went to the gym, had breakfast in a harvester, and only saw his autistic son for between the hours of 1:30 and 3 o'clock. I mean, it's and that interview kind of went everywhere, and it's obvious that he's becoming a divisive figure. And then once you've become bigger than the programme, if you like, that becomes a problem for a programme that's as iconic as MasterChef, and I think that him stepping away is the best thing for them to do in order to protect the programme, which ultimately, whatever happens, I'm sure they'll find that the programme is bigger than the presenter itself.
OK, we have to do that. Thanks very much, Lebby, as for joining us. And just to point out once again, Greg Wallace is denying the allegations and is fully cooperating with the investigation. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, here we go. My favourite time of the day. It's nearly happy hour, or in this case, unhappy hour, as Carlsberg are accused of wiping out British heritage as they axe 11 British beers off the menu. I'm almost crying into my beer. We'll get more on this madness next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
1 in 20 people are diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder across the UK.
Yes, Healthwatch has revealed that men are more likely to suffer from this than women. Did you know?
Triggers apparently include a decrease in daylight hours, which is certainly happening around about now. If you're leaving the office, it's dark. When you come home, it's dark, as well as the falling temperatures.
Yes, and both of those things happen a lot, don't they, here in Britain? So how can we combat the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder? Well, to discuss this, we're joined now by Dr. Andreas Fonseca, the founder and director of Thrive Mental Wellbeing. Really good to see you this morning, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, there'll be lots of people watching and listening this morning and saying, what a load of rubbish. It's always been cold in this country. It's always been dark. What is seasonal affective disorder? Is it really a thing?
Well, it is a thing, and it's been known for quite some time. This is not new, really. It is a form of depression. That's what it is. And it's got specific characteristics that kind of differentiate it from other forms of depression. So the reason probably we're talking more about it is because it's basically people are more aware of it and they're recognizing it more. So before you used to be sort of just saying this person's got depression, now you have some specific things to look at that can differentiate it from other kinds of depression, which is quite useful because it's got some specific forms of treatment. So the things that are different about seasonal affective disorder are that for the diagnosis you need 2 years in which you only have episodes during either the late autumn or early winter. So that's when they start, and they fade away by late spring, summer. Early summer. So that's how it works. And you cannot have any episodes at any other time. So it has to be seasonal, specifically seasonal.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:47 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. A former British soldier has been found guilty of spying for Iran. 25-year-old Daniel Khalif was accused of collecting secret information and passing it to the agents of the Middle Eastern country. Charlie Peters has the background to the case.
Checking the corners, preparing to escape. This is Daniel Khalif, inside Wandsworth Prison, about to launch his audacious breakout. Clinging to a rope sling under a food delivery lorry, he passed through the prison gates undetected. While on the run, he stole a cap from a Mountain Warehouse store. He went into M&S to buy clothes, and then got changed in McDonald's and bought a coffee. He even picked up a newspaper with his face on the front page. Arrested on a West London canal towpath, he said he was not running from his charges, but that he wanted to be moved away from a prison wing filled with sex offenders. Khalif's diary revealed that he had planned another escape attempt in August. He said in the hope he would be moved to the high security unit, but opted to escape for real when his botched attempt did not change his circumstances. He was in prison on remand for spying charges, with prosecutors alleging that the British Army soldier had collected sensitive military information for Iran. His escape sparked a countrywide manhunt, with lengthy delays at Dover amid enhanced security checks. During his trial, Khalif denied supplying information to Iranian agents. The court heard clips of Khalifa sending voice notes to his Tehran handlers.
I just started a new chat, but the messages are still not going through. Yeah, okay, just delete the last one.
The police found completely fake documents, said to be from MPs and senior military officials and the security services in his room. Images on Khalif's phone, which the prosecution said could be of use to a foreign state, were screenshots taken from the Army's intranet service. But jurors heard they were sent to him on WhatsApp by his captain as part of routine orders. As a soldier in the Royal Signals, Khalif boasted of having access to sensitive details of Special Forces personnel. Khalif told jurors that he had contacted Iran for a double agent plot, that he was a patriot, and that he wanted to prove himself. He said he wanted to expose Iranian intelligence officers working inside Britain. But regardless of his motive, the Daniel Khalif saga and his daring escape have troubling implications for Britain's security. Charlie Peters, GB News, Wandsworth.
An excellent report there into the fascinating case of Daniel Khalif. Now, it's nearly happy hour, or in this case, it could be unhappy hour, because Carlsberg, the brewery, are accused of wiping out British heritage as they axe 11 British beers off of our menus. Now, that's 8 cask ales and 3 kegged beers will be withdrawn from pubs by the end of the year. Now, it's very odd call, if you ask me, to do that just before Christmas. Well, join me now is a representative at the Campaign for Pubs, Alistair Kerr. Alistair, welcome to the show. I've got to say, some of the beers on this menu. They reads like a passport to my past. Bombardier. What a fantastic pint that was, of course, adorned with the St George's flag. Jennings, that's already been closed down. Jennings, I practically drank that like tea when I was a student. That was my go-to session ale. Banks's beer from Wolverhampton, of course. Banks's Bitter is an excellent quaffing ale. What's going on here? Is the Danish wiping out British heritage?
Well, it's an absolute shocking indictment of what massive breweries, macro breweries, are doing to small independent breweries across the UK. And this is just one example. Carlsberg Marston's made that agreement, made that merger, and Carlsberg took them completely over and now wiping out our heritage. And as you rightfully say, beers like Banks's Bitter, Jennings and Boddington's are part of our heritage, and it's just a shocking indictment. But what we feel more strongly about is that the fact that you've still got the Tide pubs that have to take Carlsberg products are now being denied more freedom of choice because their selection is now being limited. And what we are campaigning for is one of our key points is to say, well, actually, let these pubs that you have tied over about have the choice to get to select whatever products they want. And it's shocking that we are allowing these macro breweries to get away with practically destroying British brewing heritage.
Is part of this, to be fair to them, the fact that tastes are changing? My dad, all he ever drank was mild. If my dad finds mild on draft in a pub now, you can't get him out of the place because it's so rare to actually find mild on a pump now. It's almost like a blue moon. Is this a case of we're just not drinking things like Jennings, Bombardier anymore, or is it something else? Is it about choking down the supply and just giving us the same old beers and giving us a lack of choice so they can just up the volumes of production and up their profits?
Well, Martin, I think what you've just said hits the nail right on the head. It's them limiting supply, chokehold, denying people consumer choice, just saying this is the same old that you can have and no one else. You know, it's denying the great British pubgoer a choice of selection. And really what needs to happen is that this government needs to actually kind of put pressure on these breweries and say, look, if you're not going to brew these products, if you bought up all these small breweries and just kind of fundamentally close them, there needs to be some sort of intervention, and there needs to be...
Totally agree. We have to leave it there. We've run out of time. That's Anna Secure, the campaign for pubs. We've got to protect the great British pub. Now then, we've asked you a poll today, our poll of the day, and today we've been asking, do you agree with Kemi Badenoch that should migrants have access to their benefits limited? And guess what? 98% of you say yes, immigrants should have access to benefits limited. Only 2% said no. So a resounding victory there for people saying benefits should be restricted to those coming as immigrants. Now, thanks for joining me today. Of course, Jubes & Co. is up next at 6. I'll be back tomorrow 3 till 6. Thanks for your company today. It's been a huge day in politics. Have a great evening, and now it's time for your weather with Alex Deakin.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Getting a little milder over the next few days. Certainly tonight, not as frosty as last night. Still a few fog patches around. Didn't clear in some places under this area of high pressure. So it's across the eastern parts of England in particular. That's where we've got the lightest winds. That's where we're seeing that fog thickening up. Some not very pleasant conditions out on the roads here. But elsewhere, the cloud is increasing, the breeze is picking up, and it will be a wet night for parts of the north and west of Scotland, particularly over Skye. Very soggy indeed here, and that rain spreading across the Northern Isles too. Much of the mainland, though, dry and with a lot of cloud in the west, more breeze. A much milder night here. Still quite cold in eastern areas with light winds, but that fog should tend to clear away as we go through the early hours. And actually across much of eastern England, fine day to come on Friday. Going to be a bit of a wet start, though, across Orkney and Shetland. That rain should pull away to the north. Much of the mainland of Scotland starting dry. Nowhere near as frosty as this morning. And we're well above freezing in Northern Ireland. Double digits to start the day on Friday here. And we'll have that contrast from east to west, whereas it'll still be cold in the east, much milder further west across England and Wales. As we go through the day, we'll see that cloud continuing to thicken in the west. So quite a grey day here with patches of rain coming into Northern Ireland, turning quite damp here by the afternoon, and more rain pushing back into the Western Isles of Scotland. So again, very wet here. But even across western parts of the mainland, we'll see rain creeping in by the end of Friday. The west of Wales, southwest England, seeing a few showers. It's a lot milder here, but it will be quite gusty, especially on the west coast of Scotland. Much of eastern England staying fine with hazy sunshine throughout the day. We will see a bit more of that rain just creeping inland as we go through Friday evening, so a few showers cropping up over northern England and into the Midlands. And we'll see a bit of patchy rain this weekend, but a lot of dry weather, mostly cloudy and breezy, but it will be a lot milder.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The latest GB News travel.
And a very good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems in County Durham for the A1M. The motorway remains closed northbound from Aycliffe to Bradbury following a serious accident causing long queues. Banks Junction 58 at Bertree and en route through Rushford and Newton Aycliffe as you divert. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the motorway is down to a single lane southbound just before Junction 22. The Ashby de la Zouche and Colville exit, all traffic squeezing past in the outside lane where a car's caught fire. On the M5 in Worcestershire, the inside lane's closed northbound at Junction 5. The A38 Droitwich Richbald exit following an accident involving a lorry, and in